So, hello and welcome to Frivolous Gravitas, the podcast of substantive conversations. You're listening to the froggy-throated Christopher Driver, and with me today, as usual, my trusty anti-fragile Mr. Jordan Roy.
Hi, you can drop me from very high heights and I'll be fine.
Oh, mostly. We'll drop you high, baby.
Yeah. You do sound better again this week, so.
Yeah, today I'm having a good day, vocally speaking.
Yeah, make sure you get some Halls after this and drink a lot of water.
But today I'm going to sort of press Jordan a bit on some socialist issues and try to understand the public aversion to taxation, social spending, and public allocation of funds, basically. So it'll be a bit of a different format, but hopefully you'll still find it as engaging as I do, because this type of topic really stimulates me about how we should govern ourselves and philosophically how we should go about trying to govern ourselves and amending our rule sets and protocols and procedures and that kind of thing. So primarily, before we start though, I want to acknowledge that I know that there's reckless spending in government and that it's rampant and that it's horribly destructive, and I don't deny any of that. What I do want to get to is the political ideal of how to set up a polis in the most optimal way, in an idealistic sense. And then once you find the ideal, you have something to look towards, and then you can kind of like back trace it to fill in the gaps where human fallibility kind of screws us over. That's sort of the intention, or at least.
Well, you shouldn't try and be too abstract, because then it won't have any relation to reality.
No, but it's like if you're trying to design an engine, you design an impossible one first, and then you build one that's possible to be built based on that. Because then at least you know not to make the bore size like way longer than this or wider than the stroke size or whatever. You don't build 8-liter engines if you're trying to make a fuel economy car.
Right.
So basically, I want to talk about how to make a fuel economy car, but if the government was the car.
So we're going to build a hydrogen engine and see if we can come up with anything useful from that.
There's no utility to that.
No, I'm
Not
sorry.
until we come up with like fusion power or like solar arrays that we have excess to, split hydrogen off of desalination plants and, kill two birds with one. Another topic. Anyway, how easy the tangents slide. So to start off, though, I'll throw you a couple softballs just to see where you stand, and then I'll sort of respond to those, see where I stand, and then we'll kind of progress from there. So we both acknowledge, I assume, social spending is necessary to some degree in some regard, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of Mark Blyth kind of convinced me that some social spending is absolutely necessary, and that austerity for austerity's sake is a bit of a misstep. I still think like it should be streamlined, and I don't think we need committees to talk over what needs to be done ad nauseum, but you do need programs. But it's more complicated than just like, should we, I don't know, something like CERB or something might be, everyone gets $2,000, but then
or universal basic income or something where you just pay people to be people.
It's like, the more I think about UBI, the more I'm kind of not on the road for it. But
we'll probably get into that though too, because that covers socialist spending to a large degree, and I think that's really important to discuss, because most people get UBI wrong, and I want them to think about it rationally instead of thinking about how great it would be to get paid to do nothing, because that doesn't help anybody. It just makes everybody poorer.
No.
So we agree though that there are necessary investments and expenditures by the government or whatever, so we won't dwell too much on that. But simple things like waterworks, right? Everybody should have clean water and access to water in their homes, and electricity. We should all be electrified. So maybe I'll start pushing on some of the more sideline stuff.
Where I'm living, electricity and water aren't governmental.
Well, they're paid for by tax.
No, I buy it.
What?
Yeah, it's privatized.
Oh, you're in Alberta, right?
Yeah, I'm in Alberta.
Okay, well, we'll start there.
Roads, though, and buses are.
Do you think it should be privatized then, given the nature of the way corporations chase profits and neglect human health and environmental health, such as, PG&E or whatever in California, where they had like natural gas leaks for months and nobody cared, or oil spills because they just didn't build the fail safes because they wanted to save money on construction. Like, do we really think that we can trust private companies with proper regulation, maybe? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I think you overloaded that question.
What do you think about private enterprises running public services?
I think it's fine if they are kept in check. And the people to keep them in check is the government, like, because that's how abstract do I want to get here? I think, in my estimation, it seems like, corporations are here to stay. We're not going to get rid of them. So you have to put them on somewhat of a leash. I don't think we should be taking all their money, tax the rich kind of stuff. But it seems like, how do I say this? If it can be done by one party, it can be done by the other. It doesn't really matter to the consumer who's doing it, whether it's coming from taxpayer money in a strictest sense. It doesn't really matter where it's coming from. A company on its own will have more freedom to act quicker with regards to changes in the market, with regard to changes in I don't know, laws, regulation.
Well, that's kind of important too, right?
Yeah.
The government flip-flopping and changing ideas constantly, because then they never commit to anything.
Well, what the government can do is make sure that they don't step too far, because you kind of, and now this is kind of weird, because you think of a company pushing the bounds, seeing what they can get away with. Everyone thinks that's a bad thing, but you need an opposing force, because without anything opposing that is a bad thing. And then you have the government, which is a restrictive force. This is kind of starting to sound like physics, but whatever.
That's important, though.
And you have them kind of at knuckleheads with each other. And this is stressful for all the bureaucrats and all the corporate heads who are actually, resisting each other. But for the rest of us, it's advantageous for them to be having that conflict. Because essentially what it's doing is it's forcing one party to be honest, and it's forcing the other party to stay vigilant. And we benefit in the end. But to answer your question more directly, I think it can be done both ways, because one of the best ones I've seen was MPI in Manitoba, which is a horrible, bloated, and redundant government program. But they do a whole bunch of things right that aren't done as well in Alberta, which has private car insurance. And private car insurance in Alberta, if you're bringing a car into this province, was an absolute nightmare. And so you're paying more, but you're getting, if you get in a car accident in Manitoba, all you have to do is just bring it to the auto center and you wait at one place. It's very centralized in Winnipeg. In Alberta, they call it communist, which is always funny, but it's a social program that allows, I don't want to use the word socialist because it does have connotations towards communism, so I will be using the word social programs or social spending.
Fair enough. It's not wrong, so I'm not going to correct it.
Because the stuff I was talking about is, I don't have any intention of having social spending lead into more collectivist, lead into a more collectivist society. I think the social spending should be only what the social spending is. If you're helping the poor, it's only helping the poor, not with a view to help the poor rise up in a revolution.
So just for some context then, what's the price difference in your car insurance moving from one province to the other?
Slightly higher over here, but then
Slightly
again,
higher, or like 50% or 20%?
Oh, not maybe around 20%, but the cost of living is a bit higher here. Winnipeg, for those who don't know, Winnipeg, the cost of living is basically the best on the continent.
Yeah, unless you're in Kentucky or something.
Yeah.
But it's important to note too.
That's why Winnipeg has so many immigrants, because they come over and like, cheap everything. Yes, please.
And they work productively, which is nice because it benefits everybody.
Well, it's cheap university, cheap everything. And they come in and they work their butts off and then they settle down and we're like, Winnipeg, I can get used to this cold. Uh,
So we identified then that it should be necessary then for corporations to do some public works or social services. So I ask you then, when corporations work their best, or when business and economics works its best, it's with competition. But if there's only one
yeah,
service provider, there's no competition. So
yeah.
regulation basically has to serve as the opposing force of competition. Is that
Well,
right?
I think the best example of this is the cell phone industry in Canada. And everywhere else in the universe, cell phones seem to be a well-managed thing, but in Canada, for some reason, it's like the corporate Gestapo is coming to get your bucks for, you know, a limited data plan. And
But the phone service itself is actually cheaper than most countries. Like if you just get a basic plan and you're not streaming YouTube in 4K and stuff, you can get a $40 phone plan, which
yeah,
is the same as it was 30 years ago to get a landline. So it's really cheap, relatively speaking.
yeah. I'm told the plans in Canada, though, are like if you go to the States or especially places in Europe, even places in Eastern Europe, not known for their advanced technology, they kind of, we tell them how much we're paying and they gawk at us and laugh at us. But the thing is that the phone companies, they're regulated based on an old model, you know. They're regulated based on like a landline model. They're regulated based on this, and the Canadian government really put it in the comments if I'm wrong, because my I haven't looked at this issue in quite a while. Is that the government regulation hasn't caught up, so they're not able to, you know, a new technology comes in, everyone wants it, and everyone should have it. Everyone should be able to talk to anyone else in Canada. That should be in the charter, but not the charter, the bill. The ability for people to talk like that is somewhat restricted by the price of it. So, you know, you can get like you said, you can get a cheap phone, but it's
cheap phone plan.
Yeah, you can get a cheap phone plan and a flip phone. I used to have one for the longest time, up until I was like 28. I
got my first cell phone at 15, working part-time while I was in high school. Like even in the 90s, it wasn't outrageously expensive.
I think I got my first cell phone when I was 21. I was stupid old.
but I guess what I wanted to get to though is with the cell phone service in Canada, you've also got other constraints to our service, like weather and sparsity of land, and you know, we're sparsely populated. I mean, not land. Right. We have tons of land. And so it's more expensive to set up towers across a country when there's only like 1 million people per city.
Right.
Spread across 46.
That is a good point. So they have to kind of raise the price because we have so much landmass to cover.
Plus there's winter, so you've got lines that go down and power goes down and all this stuff from just frozen lines and snow, right?
So you, like, the government's job would to make sure that they don't start like ripping into, well, I guess that's the thing. To actually start making the equation, the government's job would to be to make sure that they don't gouge everything out of the consumer, because like the consumer does need to foot the bill. And oh no, you can't say that. Well, no, that's what you're doing when you're buying something. They're making it so they can make a profit, so they can make more of the thing. It's like, well, they're and you know what, they're a corporation, so their goal should be profit, because if they are not profit, then they have to be subsidized, which is a whole nother mess. But your
otherwise
job is
that regulation. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, but yeah, but then if they start making you foot too much of the bill, or if they start, you know, using tricks on you to get you to pay more than you need to, like Zoom does stuff like, you know, you sign up for 1 month and they don't cancel it and they just let you keep paying more until you realize you're paying more, or something like that. That kind of stupid trick, which is shystery. And so the government's job is to, you know, regulate that, to act to keep it from going too far. But then the corporation also has a responsibility there to its profits. If they're going to actually have to make a profit, then they have to actually perform the service. And that's kind of what the other thing that has to regulate. So, you know, your government needs to make sure that that what's being bought is actually being bought. So if someone sells you a car and you get a bicycle, you know, you're 2 wheels and an engine short of a car. And so you can go to the government and be like, I paid $35,000 for, you know, a broken Canadian Tire special bicycle, and you can send them off because it's not good business practice.
Right.
And
So as an example of that type of regulation, when it was sort of discussed, or the idea came up that cell phone service was too expensive in Canada, the government, I think, did step in to make long distance phone calls free, if I'm not mistaken, or not free, but part of the plans.
Yeah.
Whereas back in the old days, they used to charge a long distance plan and count your minutes, and then charge you exorbitant fees if you go over your minutes.
I remember counting minutes. I remember like having the clock, right? I was like, oh, we got to start talking.
But, and what that bred was just like long distance cards. So people were buying these disposable cards. You scratch off a thing, you call a 1-800 number, you enter the thing in, then you have to call this 1-800 number every time you want to make a phone call to somebody else. And it was just like this huge roundabout process that just cost time and money from everybody. And the government was like, no, this is stupid. You have to give people Canada-wide cell service or calling services or text services too, I think. They were charging long-distance text back in the day too.
Well, and that's the thing, because like people in Canada move around a lot because we have that thing in our Bill of Rights that says like we can live anywhere we want. Like the provinces can't like say, no, you're not Quebecois, you cannot live here, blah, or you can't understand our Newfie speak, so you can't live here. No, we can't do that.
Could you imagine if everybody just moved to PEI? Can't stop me. PEI is an island province for those of us
imagining like a party where everyone's there and just like, you know, where they're all shoulder to shoulder, but it's the entire island. Yeah. Everyone's got like Anne of Green Gables stuff on.
The line up to the bar would be across the bridge that crosses the strait.
Yeah. So it's like there's like a bouncer on the outside of the Confederation Bridge just being like, name. And so
one issue I have though with the corporate model is also well exemplified though in the cell phone service domain. Because the government auctions off spectrum, like the wireless spectrum that these cell providers use to transmit their multiplex signals of phone calls and conversations and all that. So I think this model is dumb in the sense that the government could be issuing rent and maintain ownership of that public airspace, and that would make more sense to me than selling it outright on an auction block for a company to sell to another company or get acquired by another company. Like, it's this roundabout way of having to like check every single time Rogers decides to make an acquisition, whether or not that it violates antitrust or whatever. But like all of that process is needless if they were just renting the airspace itself. Frequencies. So to me, a cell phone service like that would make more sense run by the government as a rent collection because it is a public good, the air.
Right. And it does make sense because the government should get first dibs on frequencies for things like national security, military frequencies, and then they can encrypt it and stuff like that. And they have sole use of that. And if anyone goes on there, you know.
But the reason they don't is because they want the company to collect user data so that they can buy it off the companies because they're not allowed through our Charter of Rights to collect it themselves without a warrant, right?
Well, you bring that up, and that's actually an interesting thing because that's a social service too. CSIS as a social service, and like we're collecting your data. Why? To keep you safe.
Fair enough.
It's not really. I don't know how this is gonna keep me safe, or well, we're only collecting your metadata. It's like, yeah, but that's not better.
But again, what bugs me about CSIS is unlike the States, you never hear from CSIS, right? In the States, they'll say the CEI did this operation and busted a big crypto mining underlord kingpin or whatever, or some ransomware attackers or whatever, right? The CIA actually, after the fact, after they've conducted an investigation and given information to authorities, the FBI will raid people. But in Canada, CSIS is just completely silent.
Well, that means they're working.
That's disturbing to me.
Well, they're
watching. Hi.
Hey, CSIS guy. If you ever want to stop by and hang out, you can let some other CSIS guy watch our conversation.
Share, and subscribe.
Seriously, though, CSIS, subscribe. But that's with an intelligence organization, when they're not in the news, it's usually a good sign. That means they're doing their job.
But I'd like to hear from them once in a while.
Like my wife has met a couple of the directors of CSIS. They're just at not a party, but like a formal gala thing. And she was like, wow, they were really nice. And they
I think that would do good for public perception, though, even just to have them, like, for instance, around the pandemic and stuff, right? If they're our central intelligence agency for the country, they should have been the first to step in and be like, okay, you conspiracy theorists, stop spreading misinformation. Like, it should have been CSIS's job, not just for like security and criminals, but like pandemic security should have been an intelligence issue, in my opinion. They could have sponsored commercials that taught people how to read statistics so that they stop trusting graphs and headlines, or like Facebook columns, or, you know what I mean? Like, they could be doing things that are intelligence related and they choose not to.
Well, the intelligence is national security focused, 100%. Like, it's
but
not.
The pandemic is national security. It's just not an exogenous threat. It's an internal threat.
Yeah, it kind of. That's kind of like, you know, it's like there's a pandemic happening and CSIS is like not my department. It's like when the CDC down in the States declared themselves to be declared gun violence a national health emergency. It's like, well, yeah, it's lead poisoning, but like that's not their department.
Yeah,
that's the
gunshot
ATF.
Victims don't die of lead poisoning.
Like, there's literally the ATF, like alcohol, tobaccos, and firearms. Like, that's their department. And for the CDC to bump in and say, like, you know, that's your social services, you know, meshing up to each other. But to get back to what we were talking about, though, one thing about the cell phone thing is that something that's happened in recent years that's helping my family, especially who lives in rural Manitoba, is Starlink. And this is Elon Musk's, you know, crisscross of internet satellites, those tiny little satellites.
The orbital rubbish bin, as I call it.
Yeah, but what the good thing about it is that my family in rural Manitoba and in northern Canada, everywhere, can now have access to the global compendium of human knowledge that is the internet.
They could have built a cell tower.
Well, it's cheaper than a cell tower.
Not really. You're launching stuff into space. Like, the fuel alone would be like 10 times more than a cell tower.
Well, no, because you're not launching them one at a time. You're launching like 50 at a time, and it's a fraction of the cost.
To run one region.
Right, but it's a fraction of the cost to, what do you call it? To launch those reusable rockets than, say, anything NASA or the Russian Space Administration would be able to. But a
cell tower is just an antenna. You can build an antenna for a few tens of thousands of dollars. It doesn't cost like, you know, rocket scientists and tons of fuel. And then these Starlink satellites aren't going to last forever. A tower will last for like 100 years. These satellites are only good for like 10 or 20.
A while.
No.
I don't know. It sounds, I'd like to see the numbers on that. But what the reality of it is doing is that these people now do have that access worldwide in all the remotest parts, and you're not going to be able to recoup your costs. Like if you build a tower to service only one region, satellites can move and can while they're orbiting, so everyone gets it. You essentially built towers to every single stupid little region and nook and cranny on the planet, except for the Antarctic and the like deep ice Arctic.
Well, they could put them there if they wanted to.
It's something about the orbital periods is like, it's like a giant torus around the Earth. But like there's nobody living in the like direct North Pole because it's water. And
yeah, but they do that because it's all basically trash. Like if you had them cycling in another orbit around the other direction, they'd be liable to hit each other. Mm-hmm. Because they're all in low Earth orbit. That's the thing about Starlink, is that it's got lower latency because it's nearer to the Earth.
Yeah.
But the cost of that is the satellites don't last as long because gravity will pull them into the atmosphere and slow them down.
Right.
But they don't have enough propellant on them to keep going.
They can measure that and know what's going to happen, and they can also come out with version 2. It does seem like the better alternative. Plus, they're not wasting. There is actual space trash out there. Thanks NASA for throwing a bunch of garbage up there. I'm not really complaining though, but because the stuff they did up there was pretty cool.
Oh, the science needed to be done. I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
But like things like the ISS were really important. But launching
China's
satellites
really bad for that.
intentionally to scatter across an entire orbit is super dangerous. Like that's not very long-term thinking. Like let's say it escalates and you do this for 50 years, right? You're going to have tens of thousands of satellites up there.
Like, well, we already have tens of thousands of satellites up there.
Okay, tens of thousands more.
Like, how many satellites do we have up there?
There's a lot. But I mean, even just tracking all that, you know what I mean?
That's what NORAD's for.
Yeah, but you don't know what China's doing. You don't know what Russia's doing. You don't know what anybody else is doing. Unless they voluntarily give you information, you don't have it. And like, what if all of India and all of Africa start launching their own Starlink alternative to compete with Elon Musk? We're going to say they can't because that would be too much garbage? Then we'd be like, as a world, favoring Elon Musk's SpaceX. And that to me that's not corporate at all. That's entirely monopolistic, and all monopolies are socialist. It's just a socialist for shareholders. And
there's 11,139 satellites that have been launched, which only 7,389 are still in space. This does not include debris.
Oh, you should see the debris clouds. They've got trackers and stuff you can look up online too.
That's what NORAD does, is it tracks via satellite everything in orbit, starting from the nose cone of Sputnik, which is like NORAD number 1. So they've been tracking that.
They've got graphical things on the web. I'll have to find the website. Maybe I'll link it in the description here. But you can actually watch it with like 3D animations, all the little pieces that they've got tracked. But the thing is, once two pieces of garbage collide, if anything breaks off them, it's almost impossible to track those pieces of debris because you can't see a screw. So when two large pieces break into small pieces, it becomes like damaging.
That's that Kepler syndrome that we're really getting off topic here.
No, but that's exactly what it is. But the topic is basically talking about social spending towards social good, right? Mm-hmm. And an example of a company not doing a good job of protecting the public's interest with social privileges, such as exclusive access to either spectrum for cell phone services or electricity for electrical producers like Manitoba Hydro, or even like insurance, whether it's private or public. And I think it's an important question to discuss the actual merits, benefits, pros and cons or whatever of both corporatizing and privatizing public services, or services that rely on public resources, such as mining. Mining is a huge one. Mm-hmm. You just give mining rights away to companies and let them do whatever they want with the money. They just destroy the earth and then they leave when it's done.
Right. And on the other side of that, if I have land, I should be able to do whatever the heck I want with it. Now, here's the thing. There's 2 rules. Don't hurt people and don't steal anything. I guess don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. But if you're hurting the environment, then you're putting, and stuff sludging into the soil, that kind of stuff. Environmentalism. I know I sound all, hardcore right, but I'm like really into environmentalism because I like nature and stuff like that.
That's hardcore left, I think.
Yeah. I think Greta's an idiot there, so that's just save me there. But what happens is, like, if you don't mine responsibly, like, you should be able to do with your land what you want. If you find copper on your land and you just kick over something and you're just like, orange metal, is that copper? And you just cha-ching, the eyeballs turn in. And so then you like get a prospector, you pay him, and then he says, yeah, there's a vein here, and you say, all right, let's tear this up, but then you don't follow the, chemicals start leaking in, you dump the soil irresponsibly, other mining things, you don't follow safety regulations for the people you hire, that kind of stuff. Like, that stuff needs to be had, because you can't just, when you're pulling stuff out of the ground, there are still rules that we've all agreed need to be there. Like, your employees need safety equipment. That's like one of the first things. And if you don't provide that for them, then I'm trying to save on some money. Well, no,
But what
they
public
need
benefit are we getting from giving corporations the right to pull out gold and make hundreds of millions and then have their shareholders write off as like capital gains so they don't even pay as much taxes on the money that they do generate? And then the companies send their income offshore so they don't pay taxes on that either. How is selling a mining right to a company that does that actually helping the public, especially when that company just gets up and walks away with pools of pollution left behind?
part of
And it's
me
not just one or two, they
part
all
of me
do.
doesn't care though. Like I'm like, oh, they're not paying their taxes. I'm just like, so
But isn't that a case for a socialist enterprise? To
I
have the
don't
government
understand.
do it rather than a company?
No.
Rather a government do it slightly more expensively, but not destroy the country doing it? And then
Well,
keeping all the money in-house?
I don't understand because you kind of skipped ahead there because you said like a corporation is going to do it bad, so we get the government to do it. No, you what? Sorry,
You'd
you
have to
lost
change
me.
all of the taxation laws, all of the international finance laws, and you'd have to change environmental laws, and then you'd have to still regulate the whole thing. So you'd have to have a whole bunch of law. Wouldn't it just make more sense to have a company run by the government?
No, because then who would offset them? Like then
Well,
who
you'd
would
still
keep
have
them
the
in check?
Senate and the Parliament, and it would be the same regulators regulating the same business, but the difference is your money wouldn't fly offshore to other countries or
Right.
get hidden in some Cayman bank or something.
Right. Now Norway seems to be the only country that's done this right because they had all that oil stuff they discovered off their coast, and then they essentially took it, and the government had shares.
Sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah, and then they just created a fund. Yeah, like you said, in it, and then everyone just reaps the benefits from it. So everyone's just got
That doesn't also force them to put in caps. Like the BP oil spill was caused by not putting in a failsafe because a company was trying to save money. It's the same thing with nat gas leaks in California. And every time there's a leak or a pipeline leak, it's because they didn't put in a redundancy check because they were saving money.
right.
And I think the solution to this would be to spend a little bit more money ahead of time in the public's best interest, in addition to reaping the benefits and rewards of the profitable business itself,
Right,
to
but
reduce the taxation burden on the rest of the country at the same time as fixing their pollution problem.
Right, but then you're kind of eliminating the free will of people to go out and start a mining company.
No, they can still start mining companies.
Right, but then they have to do it through the government.
Where they can mine in other countries.
Well, I think that just letting the government take it over it seems like a collective step, and that like I don't really have anything invested in copper mining in Northwest Territories or like coal mining or nickel mining in Ontario or something like that. That should be the purview of the people who have interest in the nickel mining or the coal mining or the gas mining. Like that seems to be their purview. The company itself is the one with the expertise. Now, to keep them from getting anywhere, that seems to be the thing that the government is best suited towards. So like the company is going to have, sorry, I'm just getting ahead of myself here in my head. The company is best suited towards doing the actual work. The government's suited towards the regulation and legal aspects of it. And I think letting just people freely confederate into a company should be something that the government shouldn't like, you're not allowed to mine this because it could go bad or it could be this, and we're like, okay, well then we'll follow the rules. It's like no, but you still have the opportunity to potentially be a shyster about this, so we can't trust you with a company. And that just seems wrong and overly paternal in my head. And I don't know why
hire
we can't
them
just
instead of letting them exploit the country.
well, why
just
does
have
everyone,
those people do the same job but for the government.
why does everyone need to go through the government? The government is the people
Because
anyways.
it's a public resource that they're profiting from. That's the reason why we're bringing it up. It's
But
not
a
that they're
public
making money doing
resource.
something productive on their own free time and free will. They're extracting something that will never go back into the earth, and it's the population who owns that earth, not the government and not a company.
No, but the population owns the earth, but you buy the rights. Like if you own your house, like if you own your land, then that's your land, and you have the laws of our land say that you have the right to do that with that land as you wish within the rules of the Canadian Constitution, which is all our laws. And so I don't see why someone.
Because that's what I'm disputing makes sense. The idea of mining rights or selling spectrum or, you know what I mean? Selling a national resource to me doesn't make sense. It should be rented out. That should be something that the public maintains ownership of, but other people can profit from. But the benefits have to then come back at least in the form of taxation.
Yeah, but
which these companies like Goldcorp aren't doing.
Right, but then who's making sure that the corporation, that the government corporate, like government corporate,
just keep it
public corporations are notoriously bad though as well.
That's where transparency could fix it. Again, we're talking about idealist, we're not saying how things function now, but ideally how things would be in a perfect society. It would not be.
Ideally people could form their own company and not have the government, tell them that they're not allowed to form that company.
Yeah, but everybody has the right to form a company.
Right. And not have the government, only have the government come in when I'm breaking a regulation. Like if I have a restaurant and have the restaurant on land, and because the restaurant has to be on land, then I have to rent out that land, even if I bought the land. But
when you register a company, you also have to declare what you're going to do on that land. You can't just do anything you want. Now I got a GST number.
Right.
I mean, you're allowed to do whatever you want, but you have to declare your intention ahead of time so that they can regulate and monitor your usage.
By that logic, we could what's the word? We could take all of the McDonald's and call them ours because the McDonald's are on Canadian soil.
No, so because they're not extracting Canadian soil. That's the difference.
Right, but they're using Canadian soil.
They're on top of it, yeah. They're not destroying it. The soil stays there once they leave. As opposed to mining, as opposed to spectrum, it's
What about aggregate companies?
What's that?
What about aggregate companies? They literally dig a hole in a quarry, or like rock mining.
Yeah, same thing.
But then most of those are small, rural businesses, especially in Canada here. You get I don't remember all their names, but you see them on the highway.
But they need to get permission too from the government to do that.
Right. And then they're just
regulated
move rocks around. Too. Right. They're already regulated. So why not leave them alone after that?
Because they're not paying taxes. They're extracting national resources and they're not paying taxes. That's the problem.
Are we sure that an aggregate company is not paying taxes? All these companies are paying taxes.
I'm not saying all of them, but the international ones don't pay taxes. That's why they're international. It's so that they can move their money offshore. And then the shareholders don't pay taxes. That's why we have capital gains, is to avoid paying taxes.
So I don't, the whole point, you're restructuring the whole system to make people pay taxes when we're making more efficient just everyday businesses that we have in order to make sure they pay a few more taxes. If I take every ounce of money I have and move it offshore as an individual, and in order to not have that money pay taxes, it's perfectly
as an individual making less than $100,000 or whatever. I'm not saying you, but anybody, most of the entire population of Canada does not make $100,000. Mm-hmm. All of those people, I don't know what the exact percentage, but I'm just going to say 75% of the population is paying an marginal income tax rate of 35%. Mm. These companies and their shareholders are paying less than 15. I'm not saying we should take their money. I'm saying they should just pay what I pay. Why would they get preferential treatment when I have less than them and they're extracting my resources to get? That doesn't make sense to me. I'm not talking about taking their money just because they're rich. I'm saying they should at least pay taxes. They're not paying any, hardly. That's the whole point of having an offshore bank, is to avoid paying taxes. Well,
that's the whole economy of Ireland was built off of providing a tax haven for.
So imagine if everybody took that same opportunity, there would be no tax revenue from the public, and they would have to tax people even more. That's insane. We don't even have to raise taxes. We just need to enforce the taxation that's already there.
Yeah.
And then everybody's taxes would go down. Well, and then you could afford to buy their services.
Well, that comes back to just blatant enforcement. Why not just... Well, because then it gets political, I guess. But we have tons of laws on our books right now that we don't enforce at all. I jaywalk every third day.
Yeah.
I rarely, like, if the at a crosswalk when it says don't walk and the little red guy comes on, I don't wait for the little white guy to come on.
You don't have to
And I
describe
just walk. Yeah. Well, I don't know. And the
point is, it's a public resource. It's like selling air. It's not
really
like they
isn't,
discovered
though.
the air and made the air. The air
Okay,
is something that everybody
what about
collectively
agriculture?
owns.
Like,
right?
farmers are growing stuff based on the public land, but like they've bought the land. That's the thing.
Right.
They
but the
own
land isn't
that
gone
land.
when they finish using it. That's the difference. They grow stuff on their land, and when they're done growing, the land is still there. It's
Well,
not
that's their screw
exhausted.
up.
It's not
Well,
polluted.
no, they have the potential to actually exhaust that land, because the thing about the farmland that's important is the soil.
Yeah, but 5-10 years it'll rejuvenate.
No.
Just from bird droppings, from grass overgrowth,
yeah.
from a couple seasons of dying and regrowing.
You can, or you could end up with what happened in Mesopotamia. Like, the Fertile Crescent nowadays is not a fertile crescent at all. It's a desert because of human agriculture.
Not necessarily. That could be climate change too.
Well, there's climate change, but we farmed the heck out of what's Iraq now? The Fertile Crescent. What do they call that?
The breadbasket.
The Tigris and Euphrates River Valley, and they farmed it out, and Babylon just looks like a desert now because they had poor farming techniques. They didn't know what we know now, 6,000 years later. And
there's also 80 million people drawing drinking water from that, though. Like, it's not the same thing.
Well, our farming methods are extremely more efficient now.
But we're also exhausting our freshwater resources. So that's another problem. We've got companies who own freshwater resources, even in Canada, but especially in the States. Like Nestle, the Pepsi company, owns the only freshwater deposit in like Wisconsin or Ohio or something like that.
Well, you get McDonald's, who owns pretty much all of Idaho for potato farming. Or something. I think it's Idaho, yeah.
But again, the reason why I'm not against people owning farms is because that land will eventually replenish, but copper will never become copper again. Once you extract uranium from that section of Earth, it will never reproduce uranium, just like oil and just like air spectrum. When you own a piece of the spectrum for wireless, nobody else can own that. It's yours. You can't, they can choose to split it and rent it to other people. But it's a limited resource. It's exhausted once it's sold once. It's a one-shot payday, and then you just own it. Mm-hmm. Like, that to me is insane because it's a public resource. I don't care about people owning stuff that they produce or buy for themselves, like a car or a hammer or a computer or whatever. But the resource itself, the profit they're getting, is from not only a polluting whatever, like we put all that aside. It's not something they're generating. It's something they're extracting.
Well, I think you're going under the assumption that because it's within Canada's borders, Canada owns it, and therefore, it's part of this. But that's kind of an old feudal notion. This is my realm. Everything, up into space below and the core of hell beneath is mine, and the land is me. And so anything anybody does on it is in my name, and anybody who does something on this land that isn't within doesn't get my acquiescence gets
You're misrepresenting
killed.
The case by saying I and me. I'm saying us.
So the us, the I, the government is, nowadays, well, no, I'm not, because I'm describing a feudal lord. And nowadays, where we have a democratic system where the government's supposed to represent everybody. Now, it doesn't mean everybody owns all of the land and the thing, because then I could just go onto other people's land and be like, well, it's on our land. It's like, no, that's not how it works. We have property
making
here.
A straw man out of nothing. There's still property ownership.
Right.
Like, nobody's saying you can't own property. So nobody's saying you can't have exclusive access or caveats or encumbrances.
So if I find coal on my land and want to mine it, the government all of a sudden takes charge of what's on my land?
No, you own the land. They can't mine on your land, period.
Right. So I start mining it and I start selling it.
That's where you're wrong, because you're extracting from the soil.
But it's my land. I don't understand this.
You live on top of the land.
No, I live Okay,
Well,
we
do you
need a
own
lawyer
part of
for
the
this.
Earth's core too? Like, how far down do you go? Like, do you own the tectonic plates? At some point, you got to say the country is responsible for being the steward of this type of property.
We don't have enough. We're talking at assumptions which we don't know the law for. Hold on.
Well, I know the law for like airspace, so you can have the same. You can just flip it around instead of from ground space talk about airspace.
Yeah, well, that's
right now. You own the air above your home. Are you saying that no planes can ever fly over your home? No, that would be ridiculous. And then no satellites can fly over your house specifically? Like, that would be absurd. Like, at some point, you have to nationalize the air and space around you because it affects everybody. What you do to pollute in your yard does affect your neighbor. And at some point, the government's got to regulate that, right?
Yeah, apparently in the States is 365 feet above ground, and you can't fly 83 feet above someone's yard. But
you don't need to know the specifics to know that there are limits. And that's what I'm getting at. The limits don't make sense.
And below ground is all the way to hell. So as far down as you want, apparently. We
live on a sphere. That means you own the land of some other person on the other side of the world.
No, that's down to the core. But, well,
I'm not trying to get that specific and technical. I'm saying philosophically, when you think about it, when the air affects everybody in the country and the government, we agree that the government's already supposed to be in charge of regulating it, it then stands to reason that the people who are extracting benefit from that public space and not paying or contributing to public revenues is a wrong practice, right?
No.
But just by rationale alone, that should be...
Okay, so say that again, sorry.
Okay. When a company is profiting strictly from the extraction of a resource that affects everybody publicly in the country,
you're
right?
saying
because
affects everybody.
Coal affects your
that's
neighbor.
The caveat that you're putting in is that you said affects everybody. It doesn't affect everybody. You should say if they're profiting from a thing, like everything affects everybody. Like
no, not everything. If I sell you a hammer, it only affects me and you.
Right, but if someone's extracting extracting, I don't know, nickel or potash in Saskatchewan, that really doesn't affect me.
If you lived next door and you smelled the pollution, you would know it does.
Right, but most of the people living around a potash mine work in that potash mine.
Yeah, but your well, where you used to be able to drink water in your backyard, your own personal backyard, you can no longer do that with a potash company next door, right?
So why... I don't understand why.
Because McDonald's doesn't poison the neighbor. That's the difference. Owning a McDonald's doesn't hurt the person owning it next to him. And when they pick up and leave, another building can come in because the soil's still there. When you take down a mountain full of gold, there's no mountain left. And it will never be a mountain again.
Right, which
is
why we have...
gone permanently.
Well, that's why we have, like...
That's what makes it public.
I don't agree because what you do on your land, especially even underneath the ground, is up to you. And if the other people, the affecting other people part comes in when you actually start affecting other people poorly. And then, you can have the government, but not just the government, but you can also have a third thing that we haven't talked about, which is civilian organizations come in and lobby for mistreatment and kick the government's butt into actually doing something about it, because sometimes honestly the government needs that. And so I don't see the abridgment of ownership rights as being infringed just to this, because I see if you make it, if it happens underground and you're messing with this or that, and all of a sudden that makes it become a government thing, then the government's just going to go around taking everything. And then, I don't see that as a solution at all. But he did mention something there that I wanted to segue to.
So lobbyists and committees, then how would you contrast the two?
Lobbies.
I'm
those
assuming just by your tone that you were against the committees, but you were in favor of lobby groups.
I'm in favor of some lobby groups, but I can't be. If I'm in favor of one lobby group, I can't be not in favor of another, because then everyone should have free speech.
No, but philosophically, the existence of lobby groups as a force to reckon with in the commercial sector.
Philosophically, I'm for them. Personally, I think they're annoying. So, like, I feel like anyone should be able to lobby for anything, absolutely anything. And if people listen to it, like, ideas need to be put forth, and a lobby is one way of doing that. Now, a lobby that just gives money, I'm ethically opposed to that. Like, just bribing, straight up bribing. I'll give you money for this. Now, there's some, like, the CCFR takes money and they use all that money to lobby in the form of public relations. They make like YouTube videos, and they put like YouTube spots and like, here's what gun owners do in Canada, and then they lobby, and most of their money actually goes to legal battles that they're fighting against the government for, so the government doesn't take their stuff. But they don't directly lobby. Now, you get lobbies that give money to, will support your funding campaign. That I don't like. But the idea of somebody being able to be like, here's an issue that's happening. They're cutting down trees in northern Saskatchewan. And everyone's like, I didn't know you had trees in northern Saskatchewan. And so, yeah, there's tons. There's Canadian Shield up there, and it's diminishing. And everyone's just like, okay, the lobby informed the public about this, and now it's an issue that can be addressed. That's, I agree with. And so that's the free speech aspect of it. But when they start saying, when they start giving money to, I don't know, any party, even like the Saskatchewan Green Party or something, that's when I start getting a bit. Now, a committee. What is a committee? I guess it's like a
group of political specialists that are, you don't want ignorant regulators, right? You want competent ones. So they'll establish a committee to be more well informed than the rest of the political body.
Yeah. So, full disclosure, I really should do this. I am actually part of a number of political bodies. So one of the biggest ones I'm a part of, no, that's not big. One of the ones I have the most.
We might not want to reference it just in case they don't want to be associated with our channel.
Okay, I'm associated with groups, two groups of archival associations in Canada, and very deeply associated with them. And mostly this just entails talking about making new websites and, how do we get archives to people in Canada? How do we make people realize that archives are actually a thing? And one of them is involved in getting funding, with which we have.
I just want to inject my own full disclosure first.
No, yeah, I'm wondering how far I need to go with my disclosure.
No, anyway, you're done. You just need to mention that you have a conflict of interest. That's all.
Yeah, go on.
That's it. I just wanted to mention that.
I thought you had some.
That's my commitment.
Yeah, so I'm not, and I've dealt with committees and I've dealt with consultants before. Now, committee, I guess, needs to be done because you can't just have, government understands of itself somehow that they can be, you get too many people together and you end up with too many cooks in the kitchen. And so what they do is like, hey, you, and you, it's like, you don't want a committee bigger than like 5 people or something, or else just be like, nothing will get done.
UN.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of nice that the UN doesn't get anything done. We should go to war. Well, maybe we shouldn't. I don't know. Let's discuss it.
Their objective is to prevent war, and they don't prevent any of them. Anyway,
that's another topic. The UN, the most useful organization we have.
Without the nitty gritty, like getting down to counting how many committee members you need or whatever.
Yeah.
You're saying that regulation should be governed and we should have competent governors regulating, which means the establishment of a committee is one way of going about this.
As competent as possible. Sometimes you don't really have a choice. You have only like Sid idiot and
So my next
Dummy
question
McGee go up for election.
is there a committee that oversees the committees to see that they're actually getting not just preferential treatment and nepotism, or like giving jobs out to their favorite staffers when they get prominent positions in politics? Like
the problem of the watchers watching the watcher. Like, who watches the watchers? And at some point, like this
is the fatal flaw of democracy itself, though. This is fundamentally a huge question.
The thing that a lot of countries did to deal with that was create another caste, and this caste was ending up being as corrupt as that. And the eunuch caste was a lot of times what happened. You get them watching the palace and maintaining stuff so they wouldn't make little heirs all over the palace with, the pretty princesses. And this is where that term comes from, who watches the watchers. And so, you make sure that the watcher isn't going to succumb to the temptation. But then what happens, the eunuchs end up being a political power in themselves, especially in places like China, where they became like masters of the court and therefore masters of the country, this giant empire at a time, and they were the watchers. So then who watches them? Well, you can't create another set of eunuchs, because then they'll just have the same problems. So at some point you just have to have everyone watching everyone else.
And that's where transparency comes in, right?
Right, because that's why when you have, the corporations saying the government's being an idiot, and you have the government saying, corporations are being an idiot, and have the civilian population, the I guess us, talking about how, stupid you're both being, and then you have like other NGOs being like, well, he's polluting the water table. So we have everyone watching everybody, and not in like a communist way where it's like, my mom said she didn't like Glorious Leader. It's like,
it's just trying to prevent perversions of the law, right?
Right. We're leveraging each other's perspectives in order to see everything at once. I don't need to be a watchdog of things in.
Okay, so how do you watch a corporation whose records are private then? That's my next question. Because at least with a government operation, the whole public could say, hey, you're wasting money here, you're wasting money here. Here's a suggestion how to do it better. Like, the public could contribute to the betterment of the company in the public's best interest under my scenario, hypothetically. But that can't really be done with a private corporation who's granted a monopoly license for say mineral rights or air spectrum or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So there's nobody watching the corporation, even though what we can see is already corrupt.
Well, there's okay, I'm just using a ton of these today. Where there's smoke, there's fire. So you can't see their records, but oftentimes you can infer. Anybody who's done like word or number puzzles knows that you don't have to directly see something in order to infer its existence. And so you can tell based on certain like practices, and then that certain things that you can look for, being able to, the police do this all the time. It's like, how does this guy living in this horrible neighborhood afford that car and that cell service and that, this and that, and have like all this stuff? And then they, pull him over and they find a ton of drugs in his truck.
Yeah, with an oil company, it's too late then. You've already polluted the entire, Gulf of Mexico, and it's like, oh, you didn't spend an extra $2,000 on a backstop valve.
Well, it is too late, and it's always going to be too late, unfortunately. But if you could see ahead
of time, people could complain before it becomes a problem.
Right, and we have that ability to complain before it becomes a problem. But
not if you're blind. If you can't see what the company's doing until after it blows up, that doesn't help anybody.
The thing is
and then
that
the
no matter
becomes the problem of the public again.
No matter what system we put in place, there's going to be failures, and you're never going to stop. You're never going to stop someone from cheating the system. There's always going to be someone who's going to be a bit successful in it.
That's cynical.
Well, no, it's the reality of everything. Like, you can't stop all vehicle deaths. You're not going to be able to. We haven't even.
It would just cost too much.
Right, we
not
haven't.
That we can't.
And it would cost too much, not just money. It would cost too much for a society as a whole.
Yeah, I know.
And it wouldn't be worth it. So we allow some sort of, and you're not going to stop people from getting sick. You're not going to stop people from breaking their leg. You're not going to stop people from making bad, personal choices in diet and, I'm going to buy this thing. And then they get home and why did I buy this thing? And like, that's never
But
going to
if you're
stop.
building something that's known to pollute and you don't build a redundant safety check, everybody in the world could have seen that coming. You're acting like it's just this, nobody could have seen it come. Like, we all know that redundant safety checks are best when it concerns the environmental hazards that you're transporting, right?
We don't, though. Like, no, we know it, but we can't infer that everyone knows it at all times. And some people go in, like, I don't know, I look at Chernobyl or something. You see, oh, well, that was, I'm not going to say that was bound to happen, but oh boy, did the Soviet system make it, a precursor. And like, it's the only way to have stopped every Chernobyl from happening would be to have gone to war with the USSR, which would have caused 16 Chernobyls and, billions of deaths.
I think that's another straw man, though, because we know how to make safety valves for reactors so that
right.
They don't melt down.
So did the Soviet Union.
And they chose not to, right? But if the public would have been informed ahead of time during construction and would have been participant in the extraction of those resources and the construction of that plant, if the public could have told the government what to do, which they couldn't, but if they can, like in Canada, and you're building a reactor and they show the plans to the public and one scientist decides to write a PhD thesis on why it's dumb to not put in one of those backstop valves so that when the reactor heats up, it melts the plug and the plug drains the reactor and then it doesn't get a runaway.
Right. And how long does that take? Like
it just costs a little bit more. That's it.
It costs a little, but the thing is that if everyone, like, you need to give enough time for the entire population of the world to read it, or you need to give
your country.
Right. But that's still, like, I'm not going to care what someone in St. John's has to say about my nuclear reactor.
If you're going to get a PhD out of it, you will. If you let scholars do their thing and actually contribute to the country, that's what they'll do.
Right.
It will help the country do the smartest thing.
Why should I be beholden to the collective when I'm doing my own work? And why? Because like this doesn't scale either. So like, if I'm going to make
GitHub works perfectly fine.
No, I mean, like, if I want to make a personal decision, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna put it up to a democracy. I'm the dictator of my own life. I'm gonna make my decision. I'm gonna make all my own bad financial decisions, and I'm not gonna consult, 6, data analysts every time I want to make a purchase. It's like
for public extraction, the social goods that we're extracting for private wealth, that's what we're talking about. So when it comes down to how does something fail in a mining project, contamination of soil and water that affects tens of thousands of people, if not more, or a water table that people rely on, or a native reserve that people live on, those types of things should be outsourced to the public. Absolutely.
Right.
Especially when the drawings and the plans themselves don't include safety checks.
Like, I agree they should be made available to the public, but whether or not we should require the public to read, that's not the thing. But who are you protecting? You're protecting somebody who's not even paying taxes and making you pay more to subsidize them. Well, I'm not protecting them. I just don't care what they're doing. They can do whatever they want to do,
but
as long as
the money you're earning goes to them. It should be going to you. You earn your money for yourself and you're paying to subsidize them. That doesn't make sense to me.
But if I worry about where every single one of my cents goes, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm trusting people to just do their own stuff. And if they get out of line, I'll, give them a smack. But
you don't personally have to do it. If you're not interested, just ignore it. Somebody will. Some nerd out there will care enough about their area, or will write a thesis on it, or whatever.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. You can have them, we're building a plant, and then the plans are available, blah 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 blah, and then anybody who wants them can go, and if they see something wrong, they can form a lobby, and then they can have a a tete-a-tete or a town hall or something and discuss it out, and the company building the plant or the factory or the whatever can say, here's what we're doing, here's what we're doing, and they can actually discuss that with the people in the neighborhood. And a lot of times that does happen.
It's a black box, though. They're not required to disclose any of that beforehand.
Right. Now you're being cynical.
It's literally the way it is. The government has made it a black box. They have private rights. Corporations are legal entities. They don't have to disclose any of that to anybody but the regulators. That's the problem that I'm trying to address by having a government maintain ownership, to which they provide transparency and all of those details towards the public, should the public choose to look at it.
See,
You could also have journalists look into it for the public, right?
I really don't see how ownership of everything changes everything, because nationalization of just all the land beneath like 3 feet just seems like too extreme.
Call it 50 feet then. How many people dig more than 50 feet down? How many people is that really affecting?
Right. But I think
mines go hundreds of feet, so it actually matters to mines.
And let them. But what is... I don't see why you're... I don't know. Anyway.
All right, we'll move on. I got other questions for you.
Right. I think enforcement, or in giving the government more teeth in that enforcement regard, and then making sure that enforcement is separate from the executive is... not the executive, but the... because a lot of times, they're not enforcing it because there's an interest in the government. And so making that, enforcing it, damn the political consequences, might be a better way of doing it. Because, the police went in, well, this looks bad for my campaign. Tough shit. Like, if you, and that's the thing, I have sympathy for people having free will over their land. But if you screw up, my sympathy ends. That's the thing, is that, like, if you get caught, oh boy, if you are found to be doing something against the law, like, well, pay up. Well, you have to pay damages. That's the thing. And that's where it is. But
companies can just walk away. They're not people. You can't lock up a company.
Well, people can just walk away.
Yeah, but companies are the ones liable, not people.
Right, and they should be
limited liability corporations. So you can make them responsible all you want and charge them all you want. Doesn't mean they're going to pay.
Right.
Like, Intel just got a European fine of a huge fine. It was like $20 billion or something like that. After 10 years of disputing it and through appeals, they got out of it through a loophole. They never paid a dime. But they obviously were charged with wrongdoing. They obviously did something wrong, and the public obviously suffered damages, and nobody's responsible for an international company.
Right.
That to me is an issue, because you're harming people for profit, but not to profit a bunch of homeless people who need it. You're harming the people who pay the least amount proportionate to their wages and taxes, contribute the least productive labor, and who side skirt all of it.
Right, but why does my money have to go to poor people who need my money? Like, I understand a limited liability company. I understand why they do it, because, like, you buy a ship and the ship sails out and gets hit by a thing.
Yeah, you don't want to be $20 million in debt.
Right, you don't want 6 people to be broke and all of a sudden the couple ships go down and the entire economy of Liverpool is just wiped out, and the British Empire is just like, you guys screwed up.
But it's not hyperbole. Look at Purdue. The Sackler family are all billionaires, not just one billionaire who gives out a couple million to his family. Like, all of them individually are billionaires, and they're walking away from an opioid crisis they actively pushed and peddled because their company's liable, and they're just closing the door of the company. How does that benefit anyone in the public? Not to mention cover the harm they've caused.
Right.
Tons of money by causing harm, and they get to walk away. That to me is just insanity that you tolerate.
Well, the government should be coming in to actually, I feel like there's like other stuff we don't know, like some political reality that allowed them to get away with it. But like the government should
contribute to political campaigns. That's why.
Yeah, that's it. That's
and
like,
judges,
because the government. That's the thing. That's the teeth I'm talking about. That the government needs to actually like enforce their own laws, and they're not. And because, well, it's a political reality. Yeah, I understand realpolitik, but I'm not too worried about government, about, if I'm having mining, or I keep going back to mining company. I'm going to make something else up.
It's fine. It's a good reference.
It's simple. Everyone understands it. If I have a mining company and I'm paying all my employees, and then someone comes up to me and says, well, your money should go to the poor people of Canada. I'm like, why? I'm already paying 600 people like a living wage. And like, that's not even including my office staff. Like, why should I? The
answer is because you're making that money off of public resources. You're not making
I'm making it off of,
or refining a product.
I'm making it off of private property that I own.
Hold on. You're making it off of raw resource extraction. It would be totally different if you extracted the nickel and then purified it into ingot yourself. They're not doing that. They're
Okay.
sending it to refineries. Same with the oil
Right, which is
company.
a refinery who
The
hires other
refinery does
people.
it. Yeah.
Right. There's nothing wrong with division of labor, though.
Nothing wrong with refineries, no. But the people making money on the public resources should be contributing to public social services.
I'm just not buying the connection between extraction and public ownership. I'm sorry. That's
Okay.
the only thing I'm not buying.
Fair enough. We'll move on to something else then.
Okay.
The other company question I had for you is like we could go into like forestation and stuff, but it's all basically the same as mining,
I
right?
feel like we'd need a forester for that. Because I don't know
I just
enough
mean,
about
like, conceptually,
forestation. It's
the
not just
idea
about
of it should
planting
be
trees.
rational.
Because China we planted 6 billion trees, and everyone's like, yeah. And then they made a desert bigger because apparently it just made everything worse. And we're like, okay, it's a lot more complicated than we thought it was.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is they're all similar conceptually. We're talking about public land and then somebody profiting from it and then avoiding the taxation after that profit. But I'll move on to other non-mining related issues because I got some other questions for you. I want to see what you think of these. So what would you think of registered universities across the country? What would you think of having government, some process of government being delegated to universities, and have universities, however they want to organize themselves, come up with the answer to the solution they're delegated?
Okay.
But have universities and scholars included as part of government itself.
Okay. So kind of a Plato, we need to be ruled by the philosophers. Well,
not ruled, but just portionally.
Well, you know what I mean. It's
fisheries should be the
a
East and West
hyperbole
Coast.
for
Manitoba should have no input whatsoever on fisheries, for example.
Oh, unless you're fishing goldeye
Hudson
in the
Bay,
Great Lakes in Hudson Bay, yeah.
Saskatchewan, then.
Yeah, Saskatchewan. Well, that's the thing. Like, Saskatchewan has a lobby saying, we free the fish, and BC and the Maritimes are just like, would you off? It's like, can we talk about? Saskatchewan doesn't.
It's same with
much.
Alberta oil. Like other provinces should have nothing to do with Alberta's oil.
Well, Saskatchewan oil might have something to say about it, but that's just competition. Now, going to the universities, I think I'm actually going to come down on the government on this side, because the separation of government and university, because first of all, if we flip the coin for half second, I don't like the idea of the government running a university. I think where universities should be just free spaces for anyone to say whatever the heck they want.
Yeah, I said the other way around. University.
No, I know. And so when you turn that, so I'm going to flip that coin back again.
Oh, I got you. Sorry.
Yeah. So when I flip that coin back again, I don't think that the university's shown an ample amount of responsibility in the last 10 years in its relation to government. They haven't really. I have a lower esteem of the institution as the university as an institution than I did about 10 years ago. And mostly this is from me actually going into one. Certain aspects of it, such as like participation awards, it being run like a, the administration running it instead of the teachers, making it focus on a business rather than it being a place of learning. And I don't see it as a place of the creation of philosophers. You'll see diamonds in the rough, but there's part of me sees, not part of me, I see, I'm going to actually stand behind what I'm talking about, but the university, how do I say this, is kind of a shadow. It's a place where you go to think about things. It's kind of a place where you go, and it's supposed to create versatile minds that are able to act kind of like on higher, you went to university. Well, you have a certain higher level ability that we can expect from you. Nowadays, everyone just goes to university. Anyone can get a university degree. I don't think the university is creates anyone more special than it did before. Second argument being, and that first argument is like, if you give everyone a participation award, the degree means nothing. And I've complained about this in the past, but and from firsthand experience. The second argument being is that you go to university and you have people, this can be kind of a less cynical argument, is that if I'm studying Shakespeare, that doesn't make me an expert on foreign politics. It makes me an expert on Shakespeare. And we need experts on Shakespeare, strangely enough. And we need experts on, Mesopotamian, funeral rite rituals. And that's what you go for. You have these. And these people are good at what they do, but they're not strictly governors. And I think governors necessarily have to come from every walk of life. We can't just have the university dictate what's right and wrong, because we've been doing that in the last 10 years and it's gotten us into a lot of deep trouble. We have what I was discussing in university right now becoming verbatim pretty much the debates we're having in the public sphere now. And so it's quite jarring, actually. But I think we need people from all walks of life. We need contractors, we need lower class, we need upper class, we need businessmen, we need we need hippies and tree huggers and miners and truckers and
I think that's the electorate, though, right?
Yeah, that's
I'm
the
sort
electorate,
of suggesting splitting the electorate in half, having some be represented officials in government and some being a group, not an individual at a university, but groups at the university coming to consensus.
Okay.
That to me would make sense. Like if you had an open forum discussion and people in the crowd participated with Ask Me Anything type of stuff.
Right.
And you publicized it and put it on YouTube and stuff, and you had students who are part of marketing and advertising actually get real world experience in publication doing this type of thing, and let the university sort out how they want to do it, whether it's by a contest or by a sitcom reality TV show style, or if they just want the leaders of all the faculties in the university, which is what, like 12 or 16 people or something like that. Mm-hmm. However they decide to do it, and then just get their opinion at least. Have a formal protocol of getting university opinion and involvement in complex issues that I think regulators clearly don't understand.
I think that's already happening to some extent, and but the thing is, it's happening slow. You can't do this quick. And I think it's already happening with people. Well, that's what we're doing.
With it though, or?
I agree, but I say it's already happening. And it's, you get people like there's, what do you call it? There's people online right now. Like anybody can go online. Any professor can start a YouTube channel if they don't care about tenure and say whatever they
got tenure, they're fine.
Yeah. It's like, guess what? I've got tenure now. Let's talk about crazy stuff. And
that's what Sean Carroll did.
Yeah. And like, that's a great example of that. And whether or not they're right doesn't matter, because that's part of the medium, is that, one professor says, here's what I think should be done. And they get 30 views. That's good. And that's all. And then this is coming from our channel. Yeah. And then, another professor at the same institution can be like, I disagree. Here's my rebuttal. And this is essentially the, journal process that was, it's outdated, but it's democratized because now anybody can take part in it. I think we should encourage that. We should encourage it. And like, we shouldn't just have Jordan B. Peterson up there doing it. He's probably the best example of this, literally saying, what if I put my lectures online? Oh, people are watching them. That's really strange.
MIT is awesome for that too. OpenCourseWare is one of my favorite channels.
Yeah. And the thing is that the medium itself acts as a town hall, because anyone can go at any time. Because the problem with a town hall is that you have to be in town. You have to be
one speaker at a time.
Right. So you can
comments
have
are great.
Debates, stuff like IQ, and you have like IQ squared has debates, which are actually great. Used to.
Now they have it's like a game show now. It's not even a debate. They have rapid fire rounds.
Jeez.
You have 1 minute to talk about a complex issue. Go.
The gods are angry with us.
Yeah, like they've Americanized it so much it's not even funny. I expect hoedown music every time the intro starts now. The
thing is that when someone gets the thing about a town hall and the open platforms that we have now, in that regard are that they are subject to criticism on a massive scale, and that's almost what's great about them. Like anybody can be like, you're stupid. You go on something like
that is the point of them. That's what makes them great.
And so you go on to, I don't know, you go on to like CBC, and like they're saying, you know, we need to build a wall between Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and everyone in the comments will be like, you're an idiot, blah blah blah, and then they have the opportunity to turn off the comments, and you know, that's
no, they should never have that opportunity.
Yeah, CBC
you immediately deny them that right.
Yeah, so like leveraging free speech is one thing that the university is good at, and I think they're failing at it miserably.
I agree.
And to outsource government, I think the government also, on the other side of that, I'm going to flip that coin around again, is that the government's already outsourcing themselves to some extent to the universities, and which is frankly not a bad move, because they're like, I need an expert on concrete. And they call up a chemist to be like, yo, you're an expert on concrete, yeah? And it's like, yeah, I invented 3 types of it. Yeah, cool. Anyway, I got this project and I need to know if it's good, because I'm going to be presenting this to the electors and blah, 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 blah. And if anyone's going to vote on it, I need some actual science for it. I don't know.
The problem is they do it by contract. So they select one researcher to find the results that they want sometimes, and they coerce results from them because it's all backdoor deals. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is it should be open so that not just one chemist is looking at the same thing. They can actually peer review the results being sent back to the government. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of contracting it out to an individual lab, they should just say, hey, we need a lab to do it. This is our budget. And then have everybody kind of do it.
Right.
And but they can choose to. They can choose.
What that would need would be some sort of system of actual open, like, oversights. Like GitHub, but like almost an open source government, which would be, I'd be in favor of seeing if that would work, because, you know, if you think government's a mess now, oh boy, wait till it becomes open source. It'll be a glorious cacophony of democracy, and like democracy is supposed to be messy. Yeah. It's supposed to be real messy, and that's, you know, it's working when it's messy. And
the thing is, all of those responses are data. Like, mm-hmm. even after the fact, if you've made the wrong decision, you can count all the people who were wrong and be like, look, it's not just us. It was 68% of you who also told us to do this, right? So right. It would actually help the politicians not take blame for things too. Like, it actually works in the benefit of the politicians at the same time.
I remember specifically there was a city planning decision to be made at the U of M, the University of Manitoba, not Michigan or Maryland. That don't you call it college down there? Anyway,
some of them are universities.
Okay, in the comments, if you can explain to me why you guys call it college and not university, please write that essay for me. But
same reason they say y'all.
What's a contraction? I don't know. But I think you actually join a college that's part of a university, and then the college is the thing you're going to. Anyway,
so what, the university is the building or the place, and the college is the...
Well, there's different colleges in universities, but we focus on the university as a whole, whereas the Americans focus on the college itself.
That's so weird.
Yeah, it's different, but they both work.
Yeah, it works. This is weird.
What was I talking about?
You said the U of M did.
Oh yeah, the city planning. So what they did was they had a city planning thing where they had this golf course that shut down right outside of the U of M, and the city got a hold of the land because the golf course just, I don't know what happened, but for some reason the city, the university got a hold of the land, and so the city put together this competition where a bunch of city planners would put forth proposals, and then they put the proposals out, and they had people write in or like, I don't know, somehow give their opinion on which ones seemed to be the best. And you could, you know, talk about it. And they had them up in this room for like, a couple of weeks, I think, or a week or two. So everyone could just file through, look at them, and, oh, I like this one. Oh, this one's got more green space. And, you know, you just talk about it. And I thought that was a neat way of going it. The problem about it is that it's still an empty golf course, as far as I know. And that was like 5-6, actually, that was probably 2015, 2014-ish.
See, I think the problem with it was the comments weren't posted. People could talk about it and walk by it and discuss it, but there's no way for the actual organizers to collect any of those conversations.
People like this one, and that's the thing. The organizers will have veto, not the organizers. The people actually in charge of the project will be like, everyone seems to like this one more. Democracy says this one, but it's got some problems. Now we think elements of this one would work too. So they don't need to actually take the public as, the public as
they're not the executors. They just offer
they can
an
take
input.
it into account, and people will generally be like, "Oh, I like this" at the end, anyways. So
that's how they built the World Trade Center, like the new one. Because everybody was in so much disagreement about it. They found out who wanted which one the most, and then they actually picked the second best option because it made more sense, or something like that.
Yeah,
they didn't actually pick the first choice though, but they did take into account the public's opinion.
Now, the other thing about the public's opinion is that it can be hilarious. What should we name it? Well, we should name it the Giant Phallus and put the Enterprise on top and have a restaurant in the Enterprise that shoots phasers at poor people. It's like, why does everyone vote for this? It's 100%.
The Codpiece lobby.
Like Bodie McBoatface.
That was great.
That was great. I loved it. And they actually had the spine to name the ship Bodie McBoatface, or I think they named the tug Bodie McBoatface. And
that was brilliant though, because it made everybody smile. That's like the whole point of it.
Yeah, and so they screwed
all
up.
right, it's yours. You can do what you want with it.
When you give people direct democracy powers, sometimes they'll misuse it when they know that it doesn't matter. But that's okay. But so you have to take the public with a bit of a grain of salt, and I think the university is a nexus to go, because there's a lot of, as much as I hate a lot of what they're doing, it's still a nexus of expertise. If you want to, where can I go to get a lot of expertise? It's like, well, Red River College in Winnipeg, or the university in any town. You'll generally find people that have some expertise there, whether it be the teachers, the students, or something. And that is something that you can leverage. And I think you can't leverage it directly, but you have to leverage it based on what project you're doing at that time. And if you need like an expert in, atmospheric science, because you're putting up, you're putting in an airport and something, and the people around there are worried about exhaust fumes. And then you bring in a guy going like, there's nothing but Cessnas coming through here. It's going to be no more than car fumes. And the people are like, oh, okay. Like, that's what you would use it for. Simple, stupid, banal stuff like that. Because most of the stuff the government does is stupid and banal. And stupid is in like boring, not like stupid isn't stupid, because we're all stupid.
but given this type of a setup, like if they had it just hypothetically in Michigan, where they had lead in their water because of the pipes were all old and outdated, right? The people would have forced that to go through. If they were in this type of an option, regardless of the price, they would just say, I don't want my kids to grow up retarded because of lead in the water.
Yeah, can't say that word.
They would have forced the government's hand on this, but they didn't.
Well, asbestos, that happens with asbestos. Yeah. If you get an office building, and if someone finds out that there's asbestos in the walls, the entire office building will let the world know.
Yeah, and they close down. They set up like they completely.
At least in Canada, I've seen offices, and like I think Red River made a fuss at one point, and it was a fuss that everyone heard about, and so that's a good example of that. I would say, and. You have to. You can't win the next election if you just let the asbestos office building get away with having asbestos.
But I think in the States you could. And I'm worried that our country is becoming more and more like the States. Whereas maybe today we would all be outraged if they didn't implement asbestos remediation protocols. But in the future, when people just don't care because they'd rather be playing PlayStation or something, I'm worried that we'll become more like the States the more privatized we get. That's my sort of input just to the university thing, because I agree with most of what you said. That's the thing
that goes back to the teeth. Now, with asbestos, luckily, there's probably not much left sitting around. And if you find it, it's going to be, whoa, there's still asbestos left. But there's other issues that would be analog to this. So I think, again, it would come down to making sure that the government still has teeth. And now private, I'm not as cynical about private interest, because I think people should just go about their lives with their own private interests, and the government does need to be there, and it does need to do its job, but we need to make sure that the government does do its job and is doing its job. It's like, yo, this is a perfect opportunity to bare your teeth. There's asbestos here. What are you doing? Like, or, this is not the opportunity to be baring your teeth. Would you put those away and actually sit down and talk? And like the Oka crisis or something like that. Why are you baring your teeth so hard? Like, you sent in the military, whereas like during the FLQ crisis, they're bombing they're kidnapping diplomats and bombing, mail boxes. Sorry. My brain just was like,
what was it? Anthrax or whatever. Is that what you mean?
No, that was like during 9/11. But the FLQ crisis in 1970, where they abducted 2 diplomats, the French separatists, militant separatists.
Canada did that?
Oh yeah, look it up. It's fascinating.
I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, and like the Quebec separatists were blowing up mailboxes all through the 60s. And a lot of this was exacerbated. Now, this is what I sent you that video of the Soviet spy who was flaring those tensions up, teaching them how to do that, IRA type stuff. And that's an opportunity where you would bare your teeth, or like where we're bringing the government's bringing litigation against oil companies being idiots and stuff like that. But then, if an oil company is saying, again, I can't think of an oil company one, but if someone comes up and says like, what was the example that I just used? The Oka crisis, the natives outside of Montreal who didn't want a golf course. This is literally it. They didn't want a golf course being put onto their land. And so they kind of just got together and blockaded the way into Montreal, pissing off everyone in Montreal. The problem is that they had AKs. It was not cool. It was a situation dedicated towards a diplomatic situation, and the government dropped the ball so hard that the premier had to call, didn't had to, but he called the military in, and there was a military standoff, shots fired. I think only one person died. And it was resolved relatively peacefully, and the golf course I don't think ever came out, but like it was an armed conflict over a golf course that should never have come to teeth. But teeth isn't just like force. It's, sanctions. It's being an absolute nuisance to people who are thinking of breaking the rules or trying to cheat a bit or waylay the system. And so you need people to go after that. The problem is that it takes so long. Like,
I think the problem is we've legalized cheating. It's not even the fact that people are side-skirting the rules anymore. Well, they've changed the rules so they don't need to cheat.
Well, I heard the word recently, lawfare, where it's not warfare, it's lawfare, where you're fighting battles in law. But the thing is, it's not legal, but we've made it so that it's so hard to convict anybody skirting the rules, because they'll just litigate forever. They'll just take the lumps and go. And
that doesn't serve anybody but the rich, because again, right, the only people who can't defend themselves or take things to court are poor people. So you can rob as many poor people as you want, millions of them, but unless they come up with a class action suit, you're screwed. Mm-hmm. So chances are, luckily, that 1 in a million will have money just out of winning the lottery or something, and then they'll carry everybody else through the lawsuit. But you can't rely on that for justice. That's a really unequal system.
Right, and most people will not understand, or if you get people like public support on your side and make it an actual issue that people care about, something like, I don't know, Apple Computer, I'm just making this up. Apple Computer, it's probably not completely made up. Apple Computers is installing stuff in their computers that's monitoring you, and then they sell like not just metadata, but like visual data of your entire day that they store on computer, like actually invasive stuff.
Our listeners should look up the NSO group.
Yeah. But and then everyone gets, imagine if everyone, this cause celeb just becomes the big thing in Canada, and everyone gets on it, and the government of Canada just decides, hey, we're going to do something about this. No, and then everyone starts yelling, no this, no this, no this. And then Apple comes up with their billions of dollars and said, know what? Prove it's happening. Or they'll make it such that you don't understand it. That confusing.
Here's the thing. They don't even have to try. They show up to a congressional testimony, and the people who are writing the laws look at their phone and they're asking Tim Cook for advice on why they get a pop-up notification for like settings on their phone. Like the most asinine questions are coming out of the lawmakers in the States who are like hosting hearings and interviewing the CEO of $1 trillion corporation who makes technology and asking tech support questions about their iPhones.
And I think
like that to me is ridiculous.
This brings in the fourth group that we haven't really talked about too much, which is the media itself. Because Apple can
in our other episode. Though.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to get into too much, but
I wanted to get to universal basic income. So go ahead. Right. I just wanted to remind you that.
But the thing is that this guy, I had to look it up, and now I know who he is. Tim Cook. What a goofy looking fella. But he looks like Mike Pence, but like worse. Sorry, that had no bearing on the argument. But
what a handsome man.
You can go on CNN or MSNBC and just say, they just don't understand. We're trying to make, society better by providing this and that, blah, 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 and the other. And meanwhile, rewatch our EULA episode, and they're, doing not that. And people will just, they'll just believe it because it's on TV. The legacy media, because it's on the TV, because they have the assumed authority of the media. And that gets them away. And then, the government can just point to the media and say, well, you wouldn't disagree with CNN, would you? You're just being, and then they'll gaslight you and being, you're just being hyperbolic. This isn't that bad, arguing against themselves in two arguments. But then they'll, and then you poison the well. Say, your side actually is supporting terrorism. And that's easy. You can do that with anything. Well, your side just they're that's
what they do with the word socialist, though. The reason that you don't like that word is because of them doing that to the word socialist.
No, I don't like the word socialist, not because of what they did. I've read enough socialist stuff to know what I'm talking about. I've done my homework, and I don't like the word socialist because it's.
But you're not taking it by the definition of the dictionary. You're taking it by the colloquial use. That's what I'm saying. I'm
taking it by the way it's used and by the way I've seen other people use it.
That's what I'm saying.
Because I've seen people use it way too often.
I have too. I understand. I'm not saying you're not well read.
No. In this specific way, is that when it was used a lot when I was in university, it was used a lot, like more than it should have been. It's like, you don't like socialism? It's like, I don't know. I'm still going through university. I'm still figuring this stuff out. But people would say, oh, we need more socialism. And then it would be a teleological thing where there would be an endpoint. Like socialism is just something on the way to a better utopia. And then they'd be talking and using it in the utopian sense. And it became in that way something that I can't abide by, because like utopia is literally nowhere. That's what it means.
That's the same rate of progression that made people say Muslims are terrorists, just because the loudest, most in-your-face were the ones blowing stuff up, claiming they were Islam. But Islam has nothing to do with terrorism. But
right.
Just because
Islam doesn't have anything to do with terrorism. Socialism
just because people use a word the wrong way over and over again doesn't mean that's what the word means. People can use the word all they want. It doesn't lick a differse to me.
Right, but me, like I know you
don't
mean
I made was about,
but I'm not going to use it because I'll use other words to say, government social program. Social program doesn't have any telos.
Fair enough. So what I was doing is attaching the way that the government was using and misusing the words is the way that it's being adopted. And I just said similarly to the way they use these words wrong.
Right. Because
And they are using that word wrong, because politicians are constantly saying, like, we can't do that. That's social. And instead of debating or actually speaking on policy, they just flat out deny it and call it a communist effort.
Right. And
but then they'll run
they're right 1 out of 100 times, but usually they don't.
But even when they're
politicians
right,
generally don't know what they're talking about.
You can't just not talk about something because you don't like a word that you classify it as. That's not science. That's not rationale.
The left does the exact same thing with the word racism, like exactly the same.
I don't agree with any parties. I think people should all just be data driven. Just look at policy and discuss things rationally. There's no reason to like just sign away your allegiance to a group of people who slightly agree with you just so you can win elections. Like that's not democracy. That's bullshit.
That I agree with.
I mean, you can call it democracy, but it's not about the people. It's about the party. It's a partocracy. And it's not meritocracy because you're not rewarding people in politics for being good at their jobs. These people are regulating technology companies and they don't understand how to use their iPhones.
Partyocracy.
That's insane. You might know law really well, but you don't know anything about, if you don't know anything about technology, you shouldn't be the one banning Huawei. You should tell them to show them the schematics. Say, we reverse engineered this phone. Here's the back door. That's a scientific evidence of something. Mm-hmm. You can't just come up with an idea and say it's communist and ban a company. That's not capitalism.
Right.
Like that's protectionism.
But I can be, as a consumer, and this is what we all have the power to do. This is kind of why, like, personal responsibility. I can say I'm worried about, like, I've seen what's happening in China based on the data that's coming up, that's leaked out of there, and I don't like it. And I'm worried about Chinese technology. Like, I'm not too worried about a Chinese T-shirt. There's not going to be like microchips in there recording my conversations. I will be severely impressed if they do manage to do that. But the Huawei phone is, I have the same qualms that I have about Apple phones with a Huawei phone. I don't like China at all. And I don't want to support a fascist regime, so I won't ever buy one or support it. Which is why I have an Android, but it's like a 3rd generation or something.
My issue isn't with the product, though. It's with the way they approach the subject. They flat out denied talking about it and debating about it like actual human beings, and we reward them with leadership positions for it because they're supposedly the best people capable of representing the country. Well, clearly they're not, if they're not willing to discuss something based on a label that they haven't even looked into. Well, that's my point.
One of them, like a lot of, and this is what's interesting, this is why I kind of have some hope, is that there's 2 groups of politicians right now that seem to, well, there's 3. There's the first group is the one that just don't do anything, and that's you're never gonna get rid of those ones. And don't do or say anything. The second group are the ones who seem to have faith in the legacy media, and they see the new media that we're getting, the new media that we're creating right now, is where we can have a long form conversation, get into the nitty gritty, make mistakes, and talk about them, and rectify our own mistakes all in one conversation. Get messy. Democracy is supposed to be messy, and they don't see that. They see it as, I can bring my rants in, my 30-second soundbite rants, and I can get those onto a wider audience on the internet. But the thing is, nobody trusts 30-second soundbite rants anymore. We're sick of them. We've had them for too long. Nobody believes them anymore. And we see this on like certain sites, and then other politicians.
I think too many people believe them. That's why memes are so popular. Anything written on a picture, people just believe it blindly. It's
memes
actually
are
really
a whole
bad.
different thing. We do communicate pretty much just in memes anyways, but memes are just hilarious
people
versions
get information from memes that they repeat to other people. They actually teach things that they learn from pictures.
Yeah, that's why I deleted Reddit recently. No, I'm not even kidding.
What, a month?
I was enjoying some of the subreddits that have nothing to do with politics. I was enjoying, like,
how long were you on though? You lasted about a month, right?
Yeah, and I couldn't escape the bullshit from each side, and I just deleted it. And it was like I was seeing myself become more and more like psychologically, like it wasn't good for my psychology, so I got rid of it.
To me, it's like eating cake for dinner every day. Like, it just makes me sick.
Yeah, and I didn't like what I was doing on it, and like I wasn't even posting. I was the thing is I was posting were like, hey, I know a guy that makes that part for that firearm or something. And like, it wasn't anything political, but I found myself still not Like you can't avoid the refuse. And one of the things that's the antidote to that is these conversations that we're having, the 3 hour, 4 hour, 2 like these hours long conversations that some people in politics are actually stepping up, sitting down with people on, and this is happening on both sides, and just talking, which was taboo before. This was absolutely taboo because what if you say something bad? You get your handler. Every politician has a handler, and they'll say, no, you can't do this, or you have to do this, or remember to say this, remember to say that. And they'll stay off certain topics, but most of the time you're actually able to press them on issues because you have that time.
So here's my suggestion to that though. Most politicians run on a dial for dollars model where they spend like 4 hours a day out of the 6 they work calling people just begging for money, whether it's companies or rich individuals or whatever. Mm-hmm. If they spent all of that time in recorded conversations with each other, like we would have more videos than we could watch. Nobody's expected to watch them all. But if they're there, then we have some points of reference to where the conversation is, where it's heading, and we have comments from the public.
Right.
And they wouldn't have to spend all their time on the phone. They could actually just sit, relax, and talk to people.
The other thing is that, and this might be a conflict of interest, but I think it would be better, was that you could direct, as you're watching, and you're like, I like the cut of this guy's jib. I like what he's saying. I like how eloquent he is. I like how he fesses up to his things. I'm going to donate to his, $10 to his thing.
Without asking for the money, people would donate.
And you could say I'm campaigning on everything you heard today. If you see me in public, ask me about that. And, if you'd like to donate to my campaign, this, and they'll spend more time talking to everybody.
Yeah.
And it's open.
If you wanted to interrupt it with ads, at least you'd know where the sponsors are. It would be right in your face who's advertising on this channel, and you'd know who's giving them money. And
you see this happening in America and Canada right now. It's like the new thing that's right in its nascence. And before, everyone was, well, I'm not talking to anybody. I'm not talking to anybody. A few, specifically I'm going to give you a segue here. Specifically, people like Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang were on. They were saying, okay, what if I go on Joe Rogan? Joe Rogan's going to let me talk until I'm dead. And Joe Rogan will be like, have you done DMT? It's like, no, drugs are an important thing that we need to talk about. And then they'll talk.
And that is so a Yang response.
Yeah. And so but they end up having to talk about it for like 2-3 hours. And then they end up having, the politician ends up having fun, God forbid, instead of just being
personality and truth.
Instead of being a cranky meth head, read Campaign Trail 72 by, what was that guy's name? Fear and Loathing guy, Hunter S. Thompson.
Yeah.
Yeah. His political book was on following the Democratic primaries was absolutely brilliant on how politics works. That will, I think, be the best thing, because now what they're doing is they're not just trying to get on Joe Rogan or what's that other guy's name? The suit, the meathead scientist.
There's a lot of them.
Lex Friedman or something like that.
Oh, he's such a meathead.
Yeah.
That's just beautiful, man. I love the guy, don't get me wrong.
Right. And they're not trying to they're starting their own. I think the Republicans right now are doing it a little more. Some of the marginal Republicans.
You'll never get Mitch McConnell or Ted Cruz to have an open
never. But you're getting people. What's that eye patch guy? He's got his own. He's a Texas one, but he does he does one, and there's a bunch of others who are starting.
We should encourage it though, because that's actually in the public's best interest.
On each side. And they should have, and they should bring in interviews. They should bring in celebrities. They should bring in experts and talk about things. And that's what they would do.
And if a candidate can't do that, they're not suited for politics. They should have a different job. If you can't sit on camera and discuss your opinions on policy, you shouldn't be making laws.
You should
flat out. You're a representative of people. You should be able to speak to people. You write laws. You should be able to discuss alternative options to writing laws. Mm-hmm. This isn't rocket science.
Yeah,
you just put 2 and 2 together. Somebody who knows policy and can speak on camera.
Right. And you're allowed to say, I'm not allowed to talk about that at the moment. That's okay, because we understand that there's things that, you people could use against you. But, you should be, if you say that too much, we think ye doth protest too much. So we'll get a little suspicious, and people will see that. And I think that's one of the best things that's coming out lately.
I hope so. I really hope you're right. I don't think they will, because I think politicians are chicken shit.
Well, they're trying to, like Trudeau especially,
scared of their image. They won't say anything on camera, especially in cancel culture. Because any slip up whatsoever, their entire career they feel is going to be gone.
Well, that's why I don't
like running for governor again, though, eh?
Yeah. Well, in Canada, I'm really worried about that bill that Trudeau put forth regarding online censorship, because that's really scary. Because that would like if we say something, if we perform lèse majesté, which is completely legal in Canada and America. Lèse majesté is like you're allowed, telling the king he's an idiot, less. And so if we say something bad about the government, and they can be like, well, that's actually fake news, and we are going to close you down because you're a terrorist or something, and we're going to define that. And I don't like that ability. I don't like limiting content. I think
that is totalitarianism.
Yeah,
that's the thing that all these people are freaking out about with the mask mandates and stuff, and nobody gives a shit about net neutrality. That's what it is. Well, that is the way to totalitarianism.
Once everyone stops talking about COVID, net neutrality will be next on the chopping block, but no one's going to talk about it because Trudeau's going to bring up guns again, because nobody in Canada cares about guns. It's a non-issue. They didn't even debate it in the last debate.
We didn't have to, though. I thought everybody is just okay with it.
Well, the thing is that they bring out guns to be like, oh, net neutrality. Look at the monkey. Look at the monkey. There's terrorists among us. Ooh, look at the monkey. And everyone's just like, okay, I'll put down my rifle and look at the monkey, I guess. And so we have to remain vigilant, and open form conversation.
Nobody's trying to ban guns. We just want registration. That's it.
Oh,
and you have registration. So we're like, okay, good.
I'd like some better registration, and long arms don't need to be registered. Like, there's so many, but like, some of the rules are absolutely stupid. I'm not allowed to have a digital pass to bring my pistols to the range. Like, I have to have the physical paper, or I get 5 years in jail.
Though. That doesn't hurt anyone.
No, I know. That's nobody's. That is not an issue for anyone except for registered firearm owners or
it's just not
restricted
a priority.
It's not a priority.
But it doesn't mean they can't change it while they do other stuff. Like, these people should be able to do more than one thing at a time.
Oh, yeah.
That's a pretty straightforward
issue. Using their teeth to keep illegal guns from coming over the border, do that. Helping people, encouraging more, and here's a social program, encouraging more psychologists to help people who were arrested with violent crimes from committing violent crimes again. That seems like a good place for money to go.
Dude, how about therapy to people who come out of jail? Like, yes. Do you know how traumatizing jail is? Like, you lock people up in prison. You think they're just going to be normal when they come out?
No, that's a social program I can get behind.
Yeah,
like that
totally.
Right there. Like,
help reduce recidivism, and everybody benefits from it. That's a social program that we could all pay for that benefits everybody.
We all have a dirty social program that we can't really get rid of. It's called jail, and we kind of need it, because it's like, you need to sit and think about, we're going to separate you from society for a bit. And the minutia of it doesn't really matter. The jail is the best alternative to just, torturing someone in public, or, banishing them, because you can't banish people. It's way more
humane, and they can study, they can learn, they can grow out of it.
At least we should let them. But the reality is messy, though, like everything is. And like, reality is messy to begin with. But the thing that, and I can see why people don't like the idea of therapists, because psychology is new. It's very new. It's like 100 years old. Psychotherapy, like Freud 100 years ago. It's like, yeah, but that was only 100 years ago, and Freud pretty much invented psychotherapy.
And he didn't figure it all out. He was just the father of it.
No, he's like, what about dreams? What about sexual attraction to your parents? It's like, okay, he's grasping his straws, but like, some of his straws were worth it. And he set a nice template, and him and Jung were kind of starting it. And psychology made some glorious missteps in the 20th century. Some absolute doozies of incomprehensibility.
MK Ultra being a good one for Canadians.
Yeah, And so there's that and some of the fake news coming out of Scientology makes me understand why people are hesitant about psychologists, because a good psychologist will help you. A bad psychologist can make it worse. And so but it's a little more mature than it was. And I think we need to start, putting psychologists in and after prison, after being like, I don't know, an office. And maybe instead of like you need harder psychologists than because you can't just have like, okay, we're going to sit down and talk about our feelings. You need someone who's going to be like, sit down, shut up, we're talking about your feelings.
Okay, hold on. Since this is an educational broadcast, we should mention there are 3 different types of things we're talking about here. There's therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists. Mm-hmm. So a psychiatrist prescribes you medications. Psychologist analyzes your pathologies, like the way if you're bipolar or OCD or ADHD or whatever. And a therapist is somebody who helps you through emotional trauma by talking. So usually a psychiatrist, they'll all sit and talk to you, but they'll talk to you with a different focus. If you talk to a psychiatrist about your problems, they're going to look for a pill to give you. They're not going to help you like dig down into your dreams and lay on a couch.
Now,
it's just important for people who are specialists within psychology. Knowing
a lot of pharmacists, sometimes a pill is the thing you need to get you to a place where you can talk.
A lot of times, yeah. If it's a chemical imbalance, there's nothing you can fix by talking that out.
From what it sounds like, a lot of psychology after that is making sure, okay, we're going to stay on your pill so we can keep talking, so we can keep you going on track, so you can keep your job and not go back to wherever that was. and keep the chaos on.
A lot with psilocybin and MDMA now. They're finally realizing that it's useful.
I want to get an expert on that so bad. I think there's a group in Calgary looking at that, specifically with war vets, and it'd be neat to interview one of them.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful that they're finally doing studies on this, because I started writing about it back in 2005 or 6. I started writing my first articles on it. Mm-hmm. And the entire reason why we weren't allowed to do any research is because they couldn't acquire any of the drugs because it was illegal for possession. So the scientists and researchers knew and acknowledged that the research was there and needed to get done. And the government had sponsored them to do research on psychological treatments. And then they said, no, but you can't buy that.
Yeah, I think there was a thing in the States where the government was just like, we're going to ignore the fact that you're buying drugs and you're going to ignore the fact that we know. Yeah. So,
just before we close out, I wanted to quickly get your thoughts on the universal basic income.
Yeah, sorry, we kind of went on a couple tangents.
No, it's good. This has been a good episode. Yeah. I'm glad we did.
Universal basic income.
The idea that you get paid just for being a human being.
It's a bad idea. That's kind of where I come down on it. It sounds great. Honestly, I think it sounds
awful.
No, I mean, the optics of it, they look great. Like,
for a politician, yeah, free money.
It's that hot chick at the party that when you go up and talk to her, she starts talking in a man's voice. But
what I would suggest, though, that's better than universal basic income is equal opportunity, so that even disabled people can work and make enough money that they don't need welfare or disability checks.
I think we're doing
enabled people who are disabled to make their own money and have a life for themselves, instead of just relegating them to the sideline and giving them barely enough to live and not enough rent. Stuff like that is just really straightforward. People need stuff. They don't need actual money. So if you just build stuff and the government builds that stuff, then they wouldn't have to give them money for it.
Right.
That's how it ties into this episode is I'm thinking.
Lately, a lot of what we've seen in the last history is that when you give people, like, we're all living like kings in Canada, every single one of us. If you're in Canada, even if you're poor, you're richer than a lot of the planet.
Relative to 500 years ago, it's the whole planet.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what we've done with this is we don't understand that we are living like it. And so we have this relativity of suffering where it's like, oh, my child has smallpox and I have plague. Oh, well. And now it's like, oh, I'm out of my coffee. Oh, why don't I have, unless so we have it really good. And so what happens
is there's a baseline of human dignity that we're not servicing.
Right.
That to me is abhorrent. Even though we have it better, there is a baseline of dignity like toilet paper access.
Yes.
Disabled people with like colitis and Crohn's should have diarrhea cleaning.
Right. But I don't feel the need to have my taxpayer money to go to my neighbor's PS4.
That's totally different from toilet paper.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, the
And
neighbors
what if the
don't have-
government had a toilet
but, like-
paper making facility and they offered disabled people free toilet paper?
God, could you imagine government made toilet paper?
Well, I'm just saying, not just toilet paper, but like, you know, cheap food, cheap furniture, cheap clothes, just something to put on in the winter so you don't
Right.
freeze.
Well, we have
Instead of giving people money to
there are
go to a
established-
store and pay Walmart to pay somebody else to pay somebody else,
there are
why
like
not just have jobs
Goodwill and
locally?
right, and we have like private institutions that do this, Goodwill, Value Village, that kind of stuff. Like I guess second-hand shops, which do that, and they're quite the industry, and they do service the population very well. And Walmart does that well, but you know, there's a lot of sugar in those stores. But at the same time, I think CERB showed us a lot. In Canada, CERB was the $2,000 a month, was it, that the government gives to everybody when
I never got it.
No, I never got it either. I didn't. I was self-employed, but I could have got it, but I have too much.
I think I got one check last summer that everybody got, but I never got a monthly thing.
I got EI once, and I didn't like how it felt, so I went and got a job. So that's kind of where
That's
I'm
the
coming
point of EI, though. It's employment insurance. It's not a job. It's an insurance when you're between jobs. That's the
right.
purpose.
So CERB was, during COVID, the thing that the government instituted that the Americans, I don't know, were complaining about not and having done, and it was a mess anyway. The Canadians essentially gave $2,000 a month to people that were on lockdown, and you had to prove that you were on lockdown, blah blah. And a lot of people tried to mess the system, and I think they got caught. And a lot of people who were gaming the system and not getting a job ended up having their comeuppance too when they found out that they had to owe the money back in taxes. They're like, why do I have to pay it back? Well, because, you know, no free money. And so this is like, I had to pay, I got rental assist one time and I had to pay it back. And it was just like, this was not conducive to, like, this is money now instead of later kind of stuff. And that's,
It was
I think,
effective at preventing a mass homelessness, though.
yeah,
People
it
who
helped.
needed it, that actually saved a whole bunch of families.
Right. And in the end, I found out that I probably didn't need it, but it did help me for a couple months. And it was, but I think what is happening is that you hit the nail squarely on the head with that. We need opportunity, because what I have seen and what I've seen when I've been unemployed is that I'm not at all mentally as healthy when I'm not working as when I'm working. When I'm doing something, I have, you know, a little bit more self-respect. I have that dignity that comes with a hard day's work. That sounds so cliche, but it's true. You are mentally more stable when you are employed on something. Idle hands make the devil's work is a real thing. And if we incentivize people to sit around, that is not psychologically healthy for them. And that's kind of my biggest thing. And so we need to find some way to make them earn that money.
Can I make one correction, though? The government in no way incentivizes people to do nothing. There is no incentive whatsoever to be on welfare in Canada. They don't give you enough to live on. You live in squalor, you can't afford to buy anything, you can't afford to go anywhere, you can't go to school or do anything. It is just like being in prison, because you can't do anything except you have a comfortable, bachelor suite that you share with two other people.
There was a couple of states in the States that, what a way to say it, in America that started instituting over COVID a similar program of unemployment insurance. I don't know what they call it down there. Social Security? I don't know.
They call it welfare. We call it EIA.
Yeah.
Employment Income Assistance here.
Yeah. And so their welfare system ended up paying more than minimum wage. So I think a lot of that, you know, if the government's going to do anything, it would be to.
And that's because minimum wage was like at $4.50 down there. Like it was so low, it was literally impossible to live on it.
Like minimum wage can be too high. And I think $15 to $20 an hour, it's a bit high. And it when you get that much, you lose hours. I saw when a minimum wage
You're
went up
saying that relative to how much you earned and made, though.
Yeah.
If you think about how much money is not being paid in taxes by the biggest corporations who are exploiting your natural resources, that could more than compensate for the deficit.
Right.
That's what people don't get is the
$4
scale,
an hour. Like
the
even
scale of the revenues that you don't understand is because when somebody gets paid $20 an hour, they're paying into taxes.
Right.
That subsidizes you too.
Right. No, I know that like everyone that makes under 40 grand a year isn't paying taxes. They're not paying for what they're getting out of society, period. Like you get buses, you get streets, you get all this stuff, you get water, you get all that stuff that society just kind of has.
Everybody's not using everything.
Right. No,
that
exactly.
Doesn't even make sense though as an argument.
That's it's support for an argument. So it's there for you, but if you can't afford a place to live to take care of that stuff, $4 an hour, that's too low. Like, okay, so let's translate this into Canadian. So $4, that's like $6 an hour. Now, generally you want in Canada, I was making $10 an hour in Canada like 6-7 years ago. And that was okay. That was like, I was scraping, but I was doing okay. But in the States, you're still, I would be making $4 less and probably having fewer benefits. That's not enough. And that I don't agree with. So, but at the same time, the people working for that would still be working for that and not just getting what is the equivalent of a living wage for, being home. And so I think
the issue is though people's spending power. It has nothing to do with the number or the amount. It's what you can actually buy with minimum wage. That's what needs to change.
Right, and you need to make that calculation. The Americans
giving
just
people
aren't doing
universal
the math.
Right, so giving people a universal basic income, all that would do is change the price of everything else. It wouldn't fix a single problem. It would make all of standard basic needs cost $2,000 more if you gave everybody $2,000.
Did you watch the show Mr. Robot?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great show. I loved it, except for one aspect of it, the conclusion. Spoilers.
It seemed basically the same as the video game Watch Dogs.
Yeah, but Watch Dogs kind of sucked. It didn't have as good cinematography. Mr. Robot had the best tension in any show I've ever seen. Just making, like, they're plugging in a USB and you're just like, oh! Like, it was great. But the conclusion of it was they stole a bunch of money.
Alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. They stole a bunch of money from the corporations. Now, they're doing this the whole time. The first season they do it and they steal a bunch of money and the economy goes to heck and they're like, oh, what did we do? And then they steal it again from the actual people they should have stole it from. And they steal it properly because they just wiped out credit card debt and it actually didn't do anything. It actually made things worse. So they stole actual money from like the rich billionaires. And they ended up giving it out to people in the end in this like happy ending. It had a happy ending. But the problem is that they gave like $1 million to every single person in America. Now, what happens if everyone has $1 million all at once?
Price of everything goes up.
Well, that $1 million becomes zero. Everyone's at the same place, except the price of everything goes up, as you said, because inflation, that's instant inflation right there.
Except if you buy things from outside of the country. Your spending power is still valid in other countries. So you import stuff. If everybody gets $1 million, you would just buy stuff from other countries and bring it in.
Mm-hmm. So it actually affects people in other countries.
Right. It affects other countries, and then they get flooded with US dollars, so they don't value it as much, and then the currency goes down. But in the meantime, you get a huge surplus of imports, and other countries get risen out of poverty almost overnight because of all the foreign spending. And everybody's encouraged to spend it sooner rather than later because of inflation. So it really destabilizes the entire world if you did that.
Right. But like a middle-class family with savings of like, it's like, oh, we've got $250,000 saved up for a house. Everyone gets $1 million. Oh, well, that $250,000 isn't worth very much anymore. So it
wipes out everybody's value. But because it equalizes everybody, it also screws up the balance of markets.
Right. And the other aspect of it is something that just fled out of my head like geez, I had an argument there.
So the
Right,
reason
paying
why
for it. Sorry, that was it. But go on.
the reason why I was saying it was a flawed argument, though, is it wasn't comparing apples to apples, right? Like,
Yeah.
having a hypothetical situation that isn't relevant or not relevant, that isn't related to the actual circumstances means that the conclusion from the hypothetical is also dubious and suspect.
Mm-hmm.
So what you got to do with, if you're going to ground the ideas of like UBI into like firm principles of organization in finance or anything like that, it's important to note where the money is currently and why things are the prices that they are now. And the reason is the income gap. When you look at the income disparity, that's like the first clue that minimum wage isn't high enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there's an income gap that large, it means there's tons of leftover money. It's just not getting to the right place. So it has nothing to do with businesses not being able to afford to pay more. It has everything to do with a certain number of people who are in power, who have control of the country's resource. And again, currency is a country's national resource. It's not owned by who has the most of it. It is a government regulated federal establishment for people of that country to exchange goods efficiently and effectively, and to store value and create value and to transfer value from the product of their labors and energy.
Right.
So it's not fair to suggest that just because somebody has more money that they earned it.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue isn't that people need to get paid more from minimum wage. The issue is the distribution of income is disproportionately gapped. It's disproportionately imbalanced because it's allowed to be.
Right.
People who make the most money can reduce their taxes most effectively by hiring accountants and moving money offshore and setting up numbered companies and writing off all these taxes and having subsidies, and all of these implements are made to help the people who are in least need, and that's created a gap that the minimum wage is supposed to counterbalance. That's that opposing friction that's knuckling
right in. Now there's that's not to say that there's other factors at work. One thing that comes to mind is that's kind of bringing down the poor, or help is like poor, like subsidies given out willy-nilly that just look good. So something like infill
that's so destructive.
Yeah, like infill lots, raising the price of all the houses. And so you build a bunch of like $800,000, and it's like, oh, it'll lower the price of housing because we have more housing. It's like, do you know how much housing you actually have to build to lower the price of housing? You don't, the government doesn't have enough money.
But they could just build cheaper houses and sell them at cost.
Well,
that's another instance the government could have a company, construction company.
They built this like $800,000 house right behind my house. My house is like, it's a 2-bedroom thing. It's great. I love it. It doesn't need to be any bigger. But no, we're subsidizing like fancy houses. Well, and then because it sounds good when you say, oh, we're building more fancy houses so people can afford more fancy houses. Like, you need to build 100,000 more fancy houses in this city for the price to go down. Like, stop. build cheaper housing so people can live in it. And or like
for $800,000 though, you could house 32 poor families.
Yeah.
And you could prevent those 32 families from needing social assistance when they're elderly if they could own them and store value in their property instead of paying rent to a landlord. So now, for every one of those mansions they build, when they expand an entire district, right, of like 60 or 70 suburban houses that are all $750,000, that's like what, 10,000 people, families. Right. So 30,000 people.
I'm going to put on my NDP straw man hat and say something like, well, those houses aren't good enough for them. I've actually heard this argument. You see it a lot in like San Francisco and stuff.
People who've never been poor make that argument.
Yes.
You and I would have taken any studio apartment that we could have owned ourselves on minimum wage. You and I both would have lived in a shoebox if that's all we could afford, because it's better than nothing. The alternative is we paid money into rent anyway and got nothing back for it.
Or living with my mother.
And then we get a government subsidy
for watching.
Rent, right? We get like rental assistance, $100 tax credit at the end of the year, paid for by taxpayers, so that a landlord can write off his income as capital gains. Like, that's insane. Why would you write off their income and give me $100 and pat me on the head and be like, hey, you're poor forever?
Yeah.
Not that I am, but like, that's not how you close an income disparity gap. You don't show
I think
preferential treatment to
you hit something on my head there that really really resounded. And I think I was talking about this with my wife last night. And there's use the word poor. And I'm not going to make like, where you have a false dichotomy where, poor isn't actually poor. No, poor is poor. You're poor. You don't have enough money. But I think there's a difference because we want to help. We want to help people like you who have, circumstantial maladaptions to reality. Sorry, I won't say it as huffy stuffy as that. You are poor technically, but you're not poor psychologically. Poor is often just a state of mind. And I think one of the things that we have to distinguish between is someone who's poor and someone who just happens to not have any money at that moment.
Let me distinguish. Poverty means your basic needs aren't met. So
yes.
If you have medication that aren't covered by the government, you're poor if you can't afford them. If you have dietary needs that you can't meet, nutrition, you're poor. If you can't afford to rent your own place, never mind own it, but just rent a place, the smallest, cheapest place you can possibly get. If you can't afford that, you're poor. If you can't afford a phone so that you can get a job, you're poor. If you can't afford clothes when winter comes and you're freezing outside and you got to wear 6 summer shirts,
right?
You can't afford a winter shirt, like one winter shirt, you're poor. When basic needs aren't met or food isn't scarce, like insecure, when you don't know where you're going to get your next meal from, you're poor. I'm not talking about like fancy haircuts and like dental cleaning and getting like gold crowns and stuff like that. I'm not talking about gas for your car or tuition for school or like, bus fare, because you can walk or take a bike. I'm talking poverty, and minimum wage doesn't cover that shit.
No. And I
mean, it does in Winnipeg, but not in Vancouver or Alberta.
Well, Vancouver and Toronto, Montreal.
Alberta, Montreal, like most of the...
Alberta's actually quite reasonable, surprisingly.
Well, when I was there, it was really bad. They were paying Tim Hortons staff like $20 an hour when minimum wage was $7.
Oh yeah, that was during the bubble.
Yeah.
When were you in Alberta?
Oh, my dad lives out there.
Oh, right. But
I also had the free flight, or not free, but like $20 flights when my sister was a flight attendant, so I traveled a lot.
I think one of the things is that a lot of the poor people we encounter aren't the poor people that are actually in poverty. We see like students who are like, oh, I'm so poor. And I'm just like,
Ugg boots, Lululemon pants.
Ugg boots, yeah. And I'm just like, and I don't really have any sympathy for that. And they're like, oh, I wish I had more money. I wish people would just give me more money. Oh, get rid of my student loans. It's like, you're the one who decided to go to university. Like, tough. Pay it off. I'm sorry, I don't have any sympathy for that. And if you're worried about it, go up to any construction company and say, give me a sign to hold. And that's it. Like, you don't have to work in service. Landscaping companies every summer need hands to put sod in. Just go up to one and say, I'll work. And they'll be like, well, the work's hard. And you'll be like, I'll deal with it. And they'll be like, fine. All right. Dude,
servers work part-time as like teenagers in university, and they made more than I made full-time as a professional manager.
Yeah.
Like, they make much more money than they claim they make. Most people who say they're poor.
Yeah,
I made real poverty, the ones that harm society because they could be more productive.
Right.
Can't be because their basic needs, they're chasing them.
Poverty where you can't just go into a construction place and say, give me a sign, and like, if you like, pay me up front for some like steel toe boots for the first 2 weeks, and give me a shovel.
Service at the government center already.
Right.
Give you bus fare to get to the job site, and they'll rent you steel-toed.
Right. So the people that we're talking about
hard hat and vest
aren't the people. Like, there is opportunity in society if you're willing to work hard, and like you're gonna. And the thing is that we have to not be above working dirty jobs. Yeah, at all, because like it's taught me more than like a lot of the stuff I know, which I still reference when I go into like, I'll be working in a archive and I'll still be like, well, I learned to work hard installing flooring. Like, you do what you need to do to get the job done. And the people, not everyone can do that. And those are the people that need our help. Those are the people that need these government social services. Sorry, that was redundant because I switched tax in my head halfway through. These social services. Those are the things that are, and yeah, there's always going to be people who are going to be like, I can take advantage of this. There's always going to be those people. We've met them. There's like, you get a group together and there's always going to be one kid who, in every classroom who's going to like say, call someone
we
gay.
shouldn't focus on outliers.
No, we shouldn't. And that's the thing. We should and what I'm arguing is that we should let the outliers be outliers and let the police handle them.
Yeah, fraud is still fraud.
Yeah, that's police is a social service that you don't talk to, that is really quite necessary to society, and they'll deal with those people. That's their job. That's why we have them. But we have other social services to deal with people that are have different needs. And I think there always will be an element of people in our society, just from stuff like the accidents of birth that nobody can control, which we've solved a lot of due to modern medicine and hygiene. But there's still always going to be people who are like, I was born without an arm. And I have to rely on social services because prosthetic limbs are expensive. Oh boy. And it's going to be harder for you to earn a living with only one arm.
Imagine even people in the hospital, right? If we went out of our way to train them to do like technical services, like computer stuff, and got them to do part-time work, like supporting the website for the government or something like that, right? Just little job like that. Not only are you not paying out for nothing, you're paying them to do work that makes them better and healthier if they choose to do it and if they're able to, and they're paying taxes. Not a lot, but instead of paying out money, you're saving that money, and then you're also gaining revenue.
Right.
Plus, you're supporting the business that they're offering services to, because money doesn't just come out of nowhere. If you offer a service to a business for cheaper than somebody else because you have like physical impairments or, requirements, that means that your service is less punctual, let's say, than another company's. Like mine, for instance, I can't be depended upon for like a to the hour meeting appointment, but I give people a discount on my services because of my unreliability.
Right.
So if you can do that and encourage that from people who are sick or needy or disabled or elderly or whatever, you're not only reducing the burden on the system for supporting them, they're also contributing to the system, not just in taxes financially and stuff, but also in the businesses that are selling their services to. And that compounds. And I know a lot of people don't get exponentiation, which is obvious with like how they treat the COVID pandemic.
Well, we've talked about that with
benefits are the best benefits you should sponsor. Always pay for a compounding benefit.
But that's why, like, we've talked about this before, which is why, like, that's why I harp on freedom and diversity so much, because, like, that's our society. What makes our society so powerful, but extremely messy and ugly, is that we're leveraging and compounding we don't just have the people that the king says can working, and we don't have to wait for the commissar to tell us that we can grow grain. People just do. We have decentralized effort to such an extent that like we have every hand in our country looking for a place to be, and we're so rich that we're doing this so much, and we have so much exponential wealth because of it, that we are looking for ways to get the hands that that aren't in the hands that are idle as a matter of consequence, seeing how we can even leverage those to further the exponential calculation. And I know this sounds very like clinical, but those people that used to just be lepers or rejects in society roaming around, we've put them to work, and we're now finding that there's still people that society's left behind. And we're now like, what we're talking about is seeing if we can even save those people.
And that to me is a case for state-owned enterprise. That's a perfect example of where somebody could be making paper towels on the government dime so that the government can hand out paper towels to people who would otherwise buy it with welfare money.
Right. I don't think that should be the, and I don't think that should be the main.
No, but like cheap
No,
toothbrushes. Everybody needs toothbrushes.
right.
Nobody's going to
But
buy the
then
cheap
if
Pro
I'm a toothbrush company, then, you.
Yeah, but then if some other business wants to do it profitably and sell it for the same price, the government just backs out, sells them their equipment if they want it, and does something else.
Right.
Like,
And
there's
so,
no reason to commit to an enterprise just because you start one.
right.
But if there's a
And
need there and you're giving them money to buy something, you might as well build it because you're making jobs and you're producing the product that they would otherwise spend money on a corporation's product, and that corporation is dodging taxes. That's money out the window. You might as well keep it in house. That's sort of my whole thing to this today.
yeah, and I don't see, I don't know.
I'm grateful you humored me though. You've been a good sport. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is a good time to wrap up. Thank you
My
guys for
voice is
listening.
about to turn on mute.
Yeah. Remember to like and subscribe, share us if you liked the conversation, and if you're still with us, definitely share us with someone that you think might like the conversation. Definitely give us a comment. That helps the algorithm quite a bit, and we can reach more people. And if you have any questions, ask, because like we know that you might not be working in Canada, and we use a lot of Canadian lingo and jargon and stuff. So there are analogs, and we can explain all that. But until next time.
Thanks for joining.
Right.
You've been listening to Frivolous Gravitas. Do, 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 do.